Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of the best darn show on the internet, the Oversharon Show. And I only say that because I'm our number one fan. Oh, me, Sharon, and maybe Joe and Spoons, and all our lovely people.
Yay!
Yeah. And we have another guest again today, which I'm very excited about. We're going to talk a lot about astrology and stuff. But before we do that, we're going to do what we always do. I'm going to read a quote. And that quote today is silence is the language of the creator. All else is poor translation. And that's by Rumi.
Nice.
Nice. And Sharon's
I
going to
am
pull a card.
going to pull a card from a new-ish deck.
Ooh.
I haven't used this one yet, right? No, I haven't. It's the Luna Soul. And
Ooh.
it's kind of cute actually.
Awesome. Oh, yeah.
That's the box.
I think you
But
showed me on Telegram.
yeah, I might have pulled a card for you. Did I pull a card for you?
I
I
don't
don't know. I
remember.
pulled a card for Zeralath yesterday.
Oh, our good friend Zeralath.
Yeah. So, all right. Temperance.
Ooh.
Dude.
Oh, wow. I like
Oh,
those wings. Ooh, and I like it got the night sky on one side with the moon and the sun on the other side and the dinosaur in the background.
there's a snake too. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Temperance is a great card because it sits right in between death and the devil. So it's like a little respite, like a little resting area. And
Find your balance,
yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah, I really feel like it is a lot about balance, and that's pictured in a lot of the cards, especially the Rider Waite, because they have the two cups, and it's like the angel pouring one cup into the other one, and you have the nice pool. And in that rendition, it's really nice because, like I said, you get the night sky and the day sky, and then you
Yeah.
get the ground with the little pool. He's got 1 foot in the water, 1 foot on land. So yeah, it's really all about balance, and it's an even
Yeah.
number too. So
And before we introduce Devin, I'll ask him if he has any comments on, because he knows a little bit about the tarot as well, or more. I don't know yet.
A little bit.
Okay.
Oh, you mean about the card? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. You said sitting between death and the devil because temperance is often associated with Sagittarius, which sits between Scorpio and Capricorn,
oh,
which same symbolism. And I've been having a lot of cool little syncs with Sagittarius popping up recently. And then so when she pulled the temperance card, I was like, of course, of course she pulled that card. Of course she did.
that's funny.
Oh, that's really cool.
And
Yeah.
you said that's the lunar solar deck. What is it called?
It's called the Luna Soul. Lunasol. I don't know if you could see.
That's cool. I was watching a live stream of a tarot reading from another channel recently, and one of the ladies there was using oh God, what's the name? I just blanked on it. I think line something, but it was the art on it was like really awesome. I really liked it. I love seeing the different art on different decks, you know.
Right. It's fun.
And
Yeah.
then
Just
there was one that I saw a long time ago when I went to a little this is way long time ago. I was in southeastern Michigan at the time. It's where I grew up. I went to this local uh, tarot meetup and a little class, and the lady who was leading the class, she had several decks in front of her, and one of the ones she had, everything was in terms of the elements. So all the artwork, and there was like yeah, just the imagery, and it was like an all elements deck, fire, earth, air, water.
I think
And
Brandon has that deck or a deck
I
that's like
do.
that.
Well, I have the Elemental Tarot, yeah, and I found out because I actually went to a tarot meetup when I was in Florida, which is hilarious because that's where you are. I was just there
right.
in February, and the lady there had an Elemental Tarot, but it was an older one, I guess, before they did the remake. It was from like the '90s, so it was a little bigger, a little different, but the art was basically exactly the same. So yeah, it's a really cool deck. And I
Yeah.
picked up mine in Mystic probably about a year ago in June. I remember because I was going into a store. I was there. I helped set up because I'm a DJ, a wedding DJ, and I didn't have any gigs that day, but they needed somebody to help set up. So I figured I'd make a couple extra bucks. And I went up there there's three of us, and two of us were setting up. And we went to walk around Mystic while we were killing time. And this lady gave me such a hard time about not covering my face. And she like chased me around the store. It wasn't where I bought the deck. I was like, all right, lady, I'm out of here. So then I went to that bookstore and they were really cool with me. They didn't say anything about my smiling face and I bought a deck. And that was one of them. Yeah. It kind of popped out at me. So
That's
great
awesome.
deck.
But Devin, you were saying that this lady had all these decks.
Yeah, I think she had like 3 or 4 different decks with her. And I just remember that element one because I was using that one. And I'd never seen that approach before. The only experience I had before that was I was doing the Rider Waite. And I was studying like the correspondence with the elements, but I'd never seen that deck before. So I really liked it. It's a cool approach.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So you guys already heard Davin, and so we've told you his name. And so Davin, actually, I haven't met him. I mean, I'm kind of just meeting him for the first time here, but I met him through Telegram. Yeah, through Telegram and through the community that is Interverse, Chance Garton's community. And I had heard of the community through some friends, Spoons and Carrie, but I hadn't really dived in or anything until Chance actually had Owen Benjamin on. And since then I joined the chat and started joining some of the other members of what is called, I guess, the Weaving Spiders Welcome. And some of them have their own other Telegram channels where they talk about kind of their own stuff that they have going on. And they do their own little things, whether they have a podcast or whether they, do like a study, like Gordy. He does a Monday night study on some of the books that he has in his collection. And everybody just does a little different stuff. So I saw that Davin had some information, some YouTube videos on sun signs, moon signs, things like that. And so I thought it would be great to have him on. Well, actually, Brandon and I did, because I sent it to Brandon and Brandon's like, let's have him on. So
I'm so glad you guys did. I mean, thank you for reaching out. And then after you guys reached out, I had a chance to watch a couple episodes. There was one that I got to see the whole thing, and then another one when I watched like the first half and I haven't finished it yet, But then I also looked around at the channel on YouTube and at the page and saw some other guests that you've had in the past, and I was recognizing a lot of names, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I get a new area to explore and all of that. But yeah, thank you so much for reaching out and for having me here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're
no
welcome.
problem.
Definitely.
And it's interesting too that I didn't even realize till we're talking today that we know some of the same people that, even outside some of these connections that you just described. Like, for example, I had was following the Positive Glows page on WordPress,
Yeah.
and so like there's other connections I didn't totally realize until you were talking about it today. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah, it's crazy how small the world actually is. Yeah, so that's our friend Spoons. She has her little blog. It's called Positive Glows, I believe. So
yeah,
that's how Davin had initially met Spoons, is through her blog. So and then they also had the Interverse in common. So that's really cool. So actually, I did, unless you wanted to say something, I was just going to ask you the background for, how you came into that community, how you found it. Are you a founder? I don't even know how that works. Like, I don't know, like the Weaving Spiders. Yeah, tell us about Chance and how you found him and Interverse and the Weaving Spiders.
Okay, excellent. So uh started first, well, okay, there's a few different places it starts and then it kind of intersects later. So one of the things you'll hear Chance talk about when people are interviewing him. So he does a lot of interviews when he's interviewing other people, but sometimes when you hear somebody interviewing him and he's giving some of his background story, you'll hear him say that in the last like 2 years, his page on Telegram really started to take off and a community started to really build around it. And he's been active in building up his channel and building a community vibe around it for a long time. But he's saying that within the last 2 years, there was like a big, kind of peak, a lot of growth happening, all at once. So there's a whole lot of connections that have been made through this Interverse community that's been gathering around on Telegram, which Interverse is Chance Garton's page. He's been doing that for years now. Or Chance Garton's channel. He's got his own website. He's on YouTube. He's got that page on Telegram where people have been making connections. Now, Chance has also been sitting in on some of the Weaving Spiders Welcome live streams. And so there's also a lot of connections between those two communities as well. And Chance Garton's been a regular guest over there. And then he also has them on something that he does called Flow State and also the Vibrant. And Vibrant is like on Wednesdays, he will have guests on, showcase a new guest or a new channel, a new avenue for people to explore. And he's had a lot of them. And then Flow State is something that they do afterwards where they do a live stream and there will be a whole bunch of people gathered. Sometimes you'll see like the screen filled up with a bunch of, there's like 10 people at once, a whole bunch of people. And they're all doing art at the same time that they're talking and listening. Oh. So a lot of times there'll be somebody will be reading from a book or doing a reading. And while they're listening to the person reading, you see everybody else working on art and they got the camera turned so you can see their, say some, Sean's doing sculptures and other people are, Kaylee's painting and there's, people doing all kinds of art. And also encouraging people to, while you listen to your podcasts, to do the creativity, get out the notebook, get out the sketchbook, get out whatever it is that you do, your creative avenue, get that stuff out and work on it while you're listening, but anyhow, so that's Vibrant and Flow State. They're usually back to back. A Vibrant episode, which is like an interview, and then Flow State, which is live artwork, live readings, and a lot of these same Weaving Spiders Welcome personalities that you see gathered over there are also gathered over on the Interverse channel for those things. Now, there's another connection that I made through this as well, which is there's a channel on YouTube called Slick Dissident, and that's Gabriel's channel. And he likes to do he loves language and words, and he loves exploring etymology of words and historical connections to things. And he does all kinds of interesting explorations with language and words. And I actually met him because, are you guys familiar with the Crow 777 radio program?
We talk about that one pretty often.
Okay, excellent. So then there's Crow 777, but then there's also Rose 777, and she works with Jason and Crow. And she also does her own channel, her own live streams. And she was replaying a lot of live streaming and replaying old Crow episodes for people to catch up on. The free first hour, doing the law playlist and the health playlist and a bunch of stuff. And I actually met Gabriel in the chat in those pages, and also Reagan from Awkwardly Awesome. And I'm going to forget the names off the top of my head because there's a bunch of connections that were made there as well. Okay. And this was before we all joined Telegram and started connecting with each other there as well. Oh. Now, I was talking to Gabriel, and he was developing his Slick Dissident page around this time. And a lot of growth there because a lot of people started tuning in, paying attention to what he was doing. There are a lot of interesting things happening there. So then also Snake Jones, Aaron Beatty, and he's at the 19 Feathers farm. He's a homesteader. And he was also talking with us, with me and Gabriel and Reagan from Awkwardly Awesome. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few other names as well. If you're watching this and I forgot your name, forgive me. But there's, he was connected with Gabriel. Gabriel actually went out and visited him on his homestead and, exchanged some books, and they hung out and they had some, a real life meeting over at the 19 Feathers farm at the homestead. And then Snake Jones has been down with the Weaving Spiders Welcome for a long time, going back years. and he hooked Gabriel up with this crowd. Hey, you guys got to get this guy on the Weaving Spiders Welcome. And from there, he met Chance, and then he's been a regular guest on the Interverse podcast for a long time now. Interviews all different types of things. Chance often has Gabriel, also known as Slick Dissident, on some of these social media places. He's on there regularly doing the language thing and the etymology and the exploration of all the different things that they're finding out with words and connections with words. So with the Weaving Spiders Welcome, I recently did an interview with Sean Elger, and I can give you a little bit of the backstory there, but I'm definitely not the expert, but I know a little bit of the backstory because we discussed some of that when I was interviewing with him. So he told me that the Weaving Spiders Welcome was started by David Barsky. And David Barsky has been a little bit less active in recent times on the channel. And Sean said he thinks it might be, we're kind of speculating, he's not entirely sure, but he said he thinks that he kind of had a different vision for the channel in mind. And he was thinking more like an interview type thing. And then what it ended up turning into in recent times was more of like a forum type format.
Yeah.
Where there will be a lot of people joining together, and they do something they call weaves, which is when you get into that flow state with the dialogue and the language, and you start finding all kinds of interesting synchronicities and connections to things.
Yeah.
It's, the weave, you're weaving things together.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so
So that's some of the backstory on where some of these other channels, pages, groups that you're seeing that are connected, where some of these connections are happening and being made.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense and explains some things, because one time, I can't remember who, and it was probably Carrie, who sent me a link to one of the weaves. I think it was a weave, because it was like a group of like 12 people online at the same time. And like, I could, it was just like the Zoom call, right? And then all the squares of, people's faces, and some of them were, like you said, were doing stuff. And some of them, like someone else was talking, and like, and I didn't know, I had no context for it. I was like, I don't know what they're doing. My mind is going like, what is going on here? So I couldn't watch it for very long because I didn't have any context. I was like, what is this?
Right.
But no, now that you explain that, that's cool. That makes sense. I like it.
And then I had found out about the Interverse podcast because this goes back like many years for me. This goes back to like the late 90s. And I kind of let go of the thread, picked it up again several times, leading up to the time we're talking about now. But starting back in the late 90s, I had a really big interest in some of these topics that you see that people are putting under the umbrella term of astrotheology.
Okay.
And then I had a long time interest in religion. It's like when I was young, I like to read a lot. And there was a time in high school when I started reading a lot, and I actually turned the TV off. And for a period of like over 20 years, I watched zero TV, like 100%. I was like, I'm done. And I just read. And I was really interested in symbolism. What's the story with religion? I had this kind of like naive curiosity. Like I was like, what is this? Why do we have it? What is it about? And part of the naive approach I had was I thought the answers were out there and I just hadn't found the right book yet. I'm like, but it put me on a little path, which got fun and interesting, a little adventure. And I started to find out, okay, so that's not how it's going to work. I'm not going to find the book out there that has a black and white print that's going to tell me all the answers to these naive questions that I had. But it did put me on a path of exploring other topics and kind of expanding my little mindset and philosophy and engaging with other topics that are out there in the world and all this type of thing. So longtime interest in religion, Christianity, did some studies on the Bible when I was in college. And then I started to branch out into like some of the work of Joseph Campbell and looking at so he does a lot with the comparative mythology and bringing the psychology into it as well. And archetypes and the subconscious and all this type of stuff. So branched out from there. Now there's overlap with some of these things and the astrotheology. And eventually this took me around to the work of Michael Tessarian. And there was a time when Chance was doing work with David Whitehead, and he still works a lot with David Whitehead and Michael
Who
Tessarian.
does? Chance does?
Yes. But Michael Tessarian's content, there used to be a lot of free available content, and his page now at the Unslaved, he's still creating a lot of content and he's still got an active community going on, but it's it's pay only.
Right.
But anyhow, there was a time when Michael Tessarian first started to his name first started to get out there. And then there was a time later after that when Chance was doing a lot of work with them. And that was how I found out about the Interverse podcast. And this was before I started even meeting any of these people or making other connections. That came like years later.
Oh,
so when
wow.
things circled back around, like I was talking about this recent time, last couple of years, Chance said there was a lot of growth, a lot of community building around that. A lot of it started with Telegram for him. It was just interesting. Some of these things circled back around. I'm like, yes, I've, engaged with some of the content of these people. I'd never met them before. It's just an interesting way that sometimes things circle back around and return like that,
Yeah. It's a loop. It's really cool.
It's a loop. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a loop, right?
We encounter them. I love it.
We're definitely giant Michael Tessarian fans, both of us. I've been following him a little bit longer than Sharon has. And I used to be, actually, I just resubscribed, but I was an Unslaved member, I think around 2018 for a good while. And then I just kind of went on to different things. And also, I wasn't really, I needed the money at the time. So, but I did learn a bunch from him. And I actually even signed up for his mystery school for the tarot and all that stuff.
Nice.
So
yeah,
I gained a lot of information from there. And I noticed that recently they've been releasing videos on YouTube. So he does release some now stuff, some of his newer stuff on YouTube. And
interviews, like when he's done interviews.
Yep, interviews. And then he'll also, I think it's Esoteric Thoughts is the name of the show, of the channel on YouTube. That guy does a bunch of different stuff with, people like Michael Tessarian and Ralph Ellis and these people. And he'll do short little clips. Sometimes they're longer, but it's another good place to get a little Michael Tessarian if you aren't a member. So yeah, I highly recommend it. We've been looking into recently a lot of his stuff about Aleister Crowley because Sharon and I have gained an interest in that area because we're like, if he's so heavily demonized, all the people he hung out with that were terrible, they're not demonized in the mainstream, like Walt Disney or like Werner von Braun or L. Ron Hubbard, all these guys are, well, maybe not L. Ron Hubbard, but a lot of these other people are so they're not demonized. They're looked at as saints. I'm like, well, then why did they demonize Aleister Crowley? Was he really that bad? But yeah, so.
Yeah, we kind of wonder. It's kind of an interesting thing when someone is so demonized by the mainstream and you're like, okay, maybe we should look further into this as to why.
So
that's a pretty complicated topic because there's going to be a lot of thickets of thorns there. Because there's going to be so much narrative, counter narrative going on that there's just, that's not an easy one to pick and work through. And
right.
When am I being gaslighted? When am I being told the truth? And you got to go through this process of like, oh, there's so much narrative and counter narrative going on.
Right.
I'm not even going to touch that one. I'll let you guys do it, but I'm not touching that one today.
It's all good.
Yeah, we don't blame you. From what I found so far, it's just like he wasn't a real good guy, but he might not have been that evil either. But a lot of his stuff was used for some stuff that wasn't the best. But yeah, he's one of those people, though. People like it's like a lightning rod.
Yeah. And we don't have to talk about it, but I will say that perhaps looking at some of the books and the books that were potentially either demonized or tucked away of his, right? Because it's from the horse's mouth that you'll hear at least from him what he thinks about things, right? Not what other people think about him. So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It gets so difficult and complicated with this topic because you also have this thing. So his IQ was super high, and he intentionally wrote to deceive and obfuscate and lead you off like the wrong trail. So it's like so hard to tell when he's sincerely stating something and when he's like leading you on to like a false trail. Looking at his own writings, and he did this deliberately, and because he's so IQ, he's like a master at it, and it's just like it's I consider it I was going to say let's just say difficult territory to work through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like the OG troll, of the day. Like he
Right,
knew he
right.
was screwing with people. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
That's actually a really good way to put it.
yeah.
I like
Brandon
that.
Brandon found some information about him. Tell them what he would do. Like,
Oh yeah. Well, I was listening to an interview with Michael Tessarion, and he was saying how people, the mainstream or whoever it was at the day, they'd write all this stuff about him and say how he was crazy, and then he would just kind of lean into it, and he would dress crazier and act even crazier in public and just like bring it on. Yeah, he was like a
makes
comedian.
makes sense. I mean, that's part of that's a part of magic that people sometimes forget about because they start to get fascinated by some of the other more esoteric things, working with energy and what can be done. And it's like, yeah, but remember, it's also like, sleight of hand, um, pulling tricks in front of your eyes and playing up to the illusion, the things that people want to see. And so like this thing comes out and then he dresses up to the part. And now it's like doubly connected in people's minds. And now he's like created this whole illusion that people are believing in that like, he's just like playing off of it. And it's like, he's OG troll. He's a master at that stuff.
dude,
And it makes it difficult to find out where he was actually coming from and where he actually sits on things. It's just like,
that's hilarious. Awesome. So, well, we actually had Davin on to talk about astrology, not Michael Tessarion, but I love that came up. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, any interesting side paths we want to take along the way as well, or I'm totally down for. It's always fun to see what comes out of it. It's fun how the conversations will sometimes take their own directions and you see where it goes. It's fun to respond to.
I love it. It's great.
That's why we call it the Oversharing Show, because we just say we're just oversharing. We're just oversharing, so.
We don't make any claims on the Oversharing Show. We just share on.
And we just ask questions. Yeah, exactly. The one last thing I did want to say about Michael Tessarion is I really appreciate his humor. I think he's really funny, and a lot of people might either miss it or not get it, but sometimes he'll like flip out about something in the words that he uses. Like I just love it. Like he really makes me laugh. So that's another thing I always liked about Michael Tessarion. I always admired his sense of humor about stuff because he gets it, like he's been down these roads forever and just, yeah.
It's a really good point because sometimes, you'll have such a deep interest in the information being shared because there will sometimes be things that you haven't heard of before, connections that you hadn't considered and different, and you're just like really dig it in. And then it's like, yeah, but he's also funny. And it's like, I almost lost sight of that for a second because the intensity of the information that was coming through.
Yeah.
But then he's also really good at it because it's like you got to relieve the pressure somewhere. And so sometimes, yeah, like a middle of a rant, and you're like, yeah, I'm feeling this rant, and I'm feeling a little bit of that, momentum behind it. And then he'll go off on a little tangent where, or like sometimes he'll do like the voice where it's like a silly voice imitating, the opposing viewpoint that's actually like absurd and not logical, and he'll throw that little voice in, and he'll be like, "Oh, thank you. I forgot to laugh for a minute there. You can, it got kind of intense. I forgot to. Thank you for bringing my sense of humor back into it." Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I've always been one to do like little voices. Even I was in the Marine Corps in the 90s, and I actually got known for a character that I would do. And so like some people would always ask me about that, and I pretended like I had no idea what they were talking about unless I was doing that character. But yeah, I still do it to some of these days. I'll just say, like, if somebody says something, yeah, it might come out today. You'll see it. But yeah, I really appreciate that because I think this whole experience comes down like people talk about God and Jesus and all this stuff. And I'm like, I think God's a comedian. Like, I think Jesus, if he existed, they wrote out all the funny stuff. I'm like, I'm pretty sure he was probably a comedian, like some of the stuff he says, even in his parables, I'm sure there was a lot more, like.
Oh, yeah. And you've got the whole trickster archetype that's always playing out in these ancient traditions. That's the comedian. And that comedian, sometimes it's funny and you're laughing with it, and then other times it's laughing at you and you're like, oh, I just took a big hit there. And it's the trickster. And there was something about the way that the synchronicity of the thing lined up that actually like, oh, that made it even that made the blow feel even more sharp and painful. Dang. And yeah, like sometimes the sense of humor is on your side, sometimes it's coming back at you the other way. And you're just like, but no doubt that whatever this is, God, the universe, there is the comedian and the trickster side as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed because humor, you can really get somebody to see truth or to see your point. Because if you can make them laugh, even if they get offended, like recently I made this guy laugh and then he got offended. But I'm like, you laughed though. I'm like, you laughed. So that's all that matters. And I'm glad you brought up the trickster because that's a kind of a motif that Michael Tessarion that I learned from him, and a lot about self-healing too, because he said sometimes you'd be following your intuition. He goes, but sometimes that trickster will come out in you and it makes you kind of go down these paths that maybe you shouldn't. But he's like, you always have to be aware of that element. So that was something that was always in the back of my mind, no matter what I was doing or trying. I'm like, am I just tricking myself here? You know, like, is there the trickster? Is this Loki energy going on right now?
Right.
And I really appreciate that. You know, it's little things like that that I used in a lot of my self-healing. And we talk about that a lot on Oversharing because we really feel the key to a lot of all this whole experience really is to heal yourself, because you get a lot of people that are into this kind of stuff and then they're into truther stuff and they're starting to point at like the Illuminati or like, you know, George Soros or all these people or the Jays or whatever. And it's like, well, is it really them though? Because I really feel like this whole experience is about consent. Everything that's going on, you really have to consent to it. And then at the end of the day, if that's what it is, there's probably an aspect of yourself that you just either haven't healed or you're lying yourself in some degree and you want to point the finger out. And we have an episode coming out that we've been talking about that, but I'll keep wraps up on that. But yeah, I think that a lot of the problems that people say are wrong with this world are really just a reflection of their own inner world and the trauma and the turmoil that they have that's unworked, you know, that's unworked through. So
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. I've actually been focusing some of my work in that direction and in that area. Also, it comes through pretty strong in Michael Tessarion's work to, you know, touch on that again, you know, like he talks about the Tao and the inward path. And I've been talking about, in relationship to the astrology, the importance of self-reflection tools. And I see astrology as a self-reflection tool and also as a healing art. And basic idea. So with self-reflection tools, there is research literature in psychology and in neuroscience that shows that people who engage with self-reflection tools, they get benefits that are significant and measurable. And the whole idea is that, and there's all different types of self-reflection tools people could use. You could do, some people do journaling, autobiographical writing, some, you know, acting, speaking. My favorite happens to be the astrology because I think it's the deepest and the broadest. But what you're doing is you're giving yourself a place to outline some of this information. There's sometimes information that's too large and too much to take in at once. But when you have a place where you can lay things out and categorize things, an outline and a categorization, you can take the things in pieces and parts in a smaller, more digestible format. And then you can start to look at some of the bigger picture. But to bring it back around to the self-reflection tools, and also this discussion of Michael Tessarion, his emphasis on the Tao and the inward path, these self-reflection tools are turning you back towards the inward path. And I call it knowledge of self, and I consider it sacred work. Because when you go back towards the inner path, how could it's just like you said, to restate it, slightly different wording. You know, how are we going to expect to have harmony in the external world if we're not turning towards the inner and doing the work there? And if you're not working to establish harmony on the inside, and also that thing you talk about, this tendency to point the finger out there, but when you point the finger out there, there's three of them pointing back at you. So, you know, like the got to turn, or you know, Jordan Peterson, how are you going to go out and change the world if you didn't even clean your own room? Or all these different ways of stating these things. But I really like the way that Michael Tessarion states it when he discusses the Tao in the inner path. And so I've been incorporating some of that speech, some of that language, but I've kind of been clothing it in the terms of knowledge of self and sacred inner work in terms of the astrology, but also the way that connects to the notion of using self-reflection tools.
yeah, I think that's actually a great segue too. So how did you get into astrology and how long have you been, I guess, studying it? Because just to give you a brief background, Sharon and I are both pretty new to a lot of this stuff. I formerly thought a lot of this stuff was just garbage to kind of trick people or whatever. And it wasn't until like 2018 when I was just studying history, and that like real alternative history and how everything got kind of graveled and where we are now, and like Cecil Rhodes. And then I was led to Michael Tessarion and people like Michael Tessarion and people like what's I can't
Santos Bonacci,
yeah, Santos Bonacci, and I can't believe I can't think of
Bill
his name. No,
Donahue. Oh,
the guy that yells all the time.
oh, Mark
Yeah,
Passio.
Mark Passio. How did that name slip my mind?
I
And I
don't
learned
know.
so much. I went back, I'd listened to Mark Passio in like 2018. He's like, you got to go back to the beginning. So I went back and listened to every one of his shows. And it was like a full, not indoctrination, like a full, um, basically teaching into all this stuff, like all this esoteric stuff, symbolism, and all this. It was like an initiation. That's what I was looking for, and I really learned a lot from all these people. But back then, I was more identifying with them, and I thought like everything that they thought I had to line up with and all that. And now, ever since 2020 and all this craziness that's happened, I've had my own point of view, and I've learned to just trust my intuition, and now I can listen to people and take a lot of their teachings, but I don't have to agree with exactly everything that they say. But
I
so
love
around
that.
2018 is when I got into the tarot, and then late 2018 and 2019, I started a podcast about it, of course, called the Terrible Podcast. My friend Ashley and we covered every single card in the deck and the major and minor arcanas. We went through them all, and it was a really great experience. I remember when we finished the last card of the last we did some more interviews and stuff after that, and we changed it up, but after that I felt like I had an upgrade because we kind of went through and analyzed every card. But but previously though I thought it was all just trickery and bunk, and just because what I saw in the mainstream was a lot of people would go to tarot readers and then become like dependent on them, so that they would learn stuff, but they would always have to go back to that reader to find out what was going on. And I saw the gravel on that. And then when I learned the tarot, you can use it as a tool for self-healing, just like astrology. I changed my mind and I started to dive in. So what led you really into astrology and all this stuff?
So goes back to that time when I was taking an interest in learning about religion and comparative mythology. And turns out that there's a lot of overlap there between that and the subjects that kind of come under this umbrella term of astrotheology, which is just another way of saying elements of symbolism within religion, within ancient mythology, that have an orientation in what's happening in the sky clock, in what's happening in the astrology. So started to take a little bit of an interest there, came across some of the work of Jordan Maxwell, and then later Michael Tessarion. And so it started to get a little deeper then, but still then I was more interested in the symbolism and this world of like ancient myth and this type of thing, not in terms of actually learning how to do astrology or practice astrology or anything like that. That came later, but started to take a little bit more of an interest, and I just started learning some of the topics. I just picked like a new topic that I hadn't explored and started exploring it and working with it. And it started getting just more and more interesting and kind of snowballing as it went along. And eventually got to the point where I was teaching myself how to read my natal chart. And there was actually two things that kind of tipped things over the edge for me. One was when I learned about the ascendant and order of the houses in astrology and the way that information plays into learning how to read your natal chart. And then the other thing was when I started exploring the information on Chiron in astrology and looking at my Chiron placement. And there were these two things that I'm teaching myself how to read my natal chart. I'm starting to explore the astrology a little bit more. And these parts of the information, there was like this background story going on that I wasn't seeing in the natal chart that started to come up towards the surface and connecting other parts of the chart that I didn't notice were connected. And so this other story that came up to the surface, and then I started to get way more serious. I was like, okay, I need to, this is dope. This is fun. I'm engaged. I'm excited about this. Like, I started to have just a hunger for it. I need to learn more. I got to know more, because every time I do this, I'm getting more and more out of it. And I started taking it more serious, started to take astrology classes. It wasn't until recent years that I started actually taking classes and starting to take the study more serious on that side of things. But I had an interest in it where I was kind of doing some casual study on my own and teaching myself. And I would kind of get into it, and then I would get busy and do other things and get out of it for a while, and then I'd get back in. And this went on for many years, like more than 10 years, where I was kind of like getting into it and then doing other things, then going back to it. But then in recent years is when I started to actually get more serious to the level of actually signing up and taking classes and making it a more formal study and dedicating myself to it a bit more seriously. And also actually producing content and putting content out in social media, which was difficult to do because there was a time when I didn't want my face or my name out there. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want, there's nothing like that. But then I eventually pushed myself to get over it. And I was like, all right, there's certain things I want to do with this. I'm going to have to get over this. I'm going to have to learn to just accept it, put my face out there, just go with it and see what happens and work from there.
Yeah, the first thing that I came across was Sharon sent me the video that you did about Virgo moon signs, because I'm a Virgo moon, and I guess you're a Virgo moon also, so we have that synchronicity. And what you said was like really great. I've heard some of that stuff before, but the part where you're talking about taking it easy on yourself and not to be so critical of yourself, that part really resonated with me, because that's something I've been working on for a while now. I think I'm a lot better at it now. But yeah, that's something that because I always felt like I was either doing something wrong or I wasn't doing enough, or, this is stupid. You have like that voice in your head. And now I've learned to either just laugh with it or kind of make friends with it, like we were talking about earlier, the comedy part now, because I did stand-up comedy also for 7 years, from about 2013 to 2020.
Oh,
and,
nice.
Yeah. And so I think that was really the beginning of my self-healing, and I just didn't realize it yet. But I would just go up at open mics and talk on stage about everything, stuff that happened in my life that day. I would try to make jokes about it and stuff. And it was super healing for me. And that's when I started to, because I had this whole, I used to have really short hair, but I had this whole change. I had definitely different behavior. I wrote a whole book about it. I had very severe intimacy issues. But a lot of that stuff is gone now and been working through it. But I was just going to say, when I saw your video, though, that really kind of blew my mind. How long have you been doing the videos on YouTube?
Doing astrology videos on YouTube is a pretty recent thing. I think I haven't actually paid attention or kept track, but it's like somewhere between 1 and 2 years. I had done some other content on YouTube, other things, never putting astrology out there though for a long time. I was doing some self-study, teaching myself, getting into the topic, started getting into the topic more. It wasn't until very recent that I actually started to put content out on astrology on YouTube though, or on any social media really. That's a recent thing. Things kind of gathered some momentum, and then I realized some of the things I wanted to do, I was kind of going to have to do it. And so then, like I said, I had to confront some of those things like, all right, I'm going to have to deal with this, get over this thing of not wanting to put my face or my name out there and all that type of thing, so kind of pushed myself to go over that bump and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty recent.
Oh, that's cool. And one other thing I wanted to say, and then I'll let Sharon, if she wants to chime in, but I like what you said about you were into studying symbolism and all this stuff, and then it kept leading you into self-work. And I think that's another area where a lot of people don't take that next step, because that self-work is really one of the hardest things, because it's scary. You have to admit you were wrong about a lot of things. You have to admit that most of the problems in your life are caused by you, no matter what anybody did to you when you were younger or whatever trauma that you suffered. Now you're an adult, and now you have to take responsibility for it. And I think a lot of people don't take that next step, and that's what we're all about. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. We do definitely talk a lot about self-work, inner healing, self-healing. We do a lot of that stuff on here. But I just wanted to just say my background with astrology was a little different than Brandon's. I grew up actually in a church that acknowledged that it was okay to look into your zodiac and your sun sign and your natal chart, etc. But I didn't exactly, when I was growing up, know about how to map out the natal chart or, do all the detail. I knew that there was more to it than just the sun and the moon and all these other things. But I really mostly only would focus on the sun. And I grew up having the book called something about the only astrology book you'll ever need, I think. I grew up with that book in the house, so I knew about that, and I would use it to look things up and see, because it was like compatibility between you and, you know, your lover or something like that. So I kind of grew up knowing that, you know, there hopefully should be some compatibility between you and the other person, right? And so I would read those, and I knew growing up that Gemini and Libra were very compatible. So like it's funny because I ended up marrying my kind of high school sweetheart, Wesley, who was a Gemini, and like we had literally like a pretty perfect relationship. You know, for as long as it was, but he passed away. So, but anyway, it like, it's just crazy how it really was true that was a really good compatibility for me. So I did grow up with that, but of course you go through life, you come across more material. You know, I got to a point where I was going to a church several years ago, because I had stopped going to church because I kind of was like, I'm done with that. And I stopped for several years, but then I was like, maybe I should go back. So I went back, and then I dug deeper into the Bible and stuff. And the more I dug, the more questions I had, the more things didn't make sense, but I wasn't allowed to ask certain questions because you're not allowed, you know, like that question is not, it's not allowed. And you're not allowed to read books that aren't vetted by the pastor. Did you ask the pastor if you could read that? And I'm like, excuse me, I have my own brain. Why are you playing? So it was craziness. But like, I felt like there was a lot of opposition to a lot of stuff. Like, you know, it was kind of unspoken, but it was like anything that was not churchy, you know, was kind of like, well, just be careful with that. You know, if it was yoga or you know, who knows? I don't know, but I just felt like there would be that opposition. So I kind of, I don't think I ever went away from it completely, but you know, it was for a little while kind of like, okay, what am I doing? And then in 2020, that was the year of wake up calls. That was the year of wake up. And I left the church. I was like, I'm done. And I was like, I'm going to find my answers my own way. I don't need somebody to tell me. And that's how I came across people in late 2019. I was already meeting people online, and eventually met through the people I met, or I kind of went into the Bertaria community, Owen Benjamin's community. And then that's how I met Brandon. And then through Brandon, I got to know a little about the tarot, which I was already hearing Crow talk about. And he would always talk about meditations on the tarot. At the time, he was talking about it a lot. And so I was like, well, Brandon, you know about tarot, answer these questions for me. And so he was like, well, why don't we just do a show and you can ask me questions, and then that way other people can maybe have those answers too. They might have the same questions. So we did one small episode that was not over Sharon. It was just a Brandon Bonanza channel episode. And then some months later, he's like, we should have a show called Over Sharon, and we should just talk about the things we talk about on the phone, like when we have conversations. So that's how we started the Over Sharon almost a year ago. By the time this airs, it will be a year, I think. Yeah.
That's a great way to start, is like, you know, these topics you're discussing with your friends, that type of conversation we've been having on the phone. Why aren't we putting that out there? Because, you know, people are so fed up with the stuff that's been coming through the media And we're so sick of experts
Mhm.
and
Mm.
celebrities and
Mm.
celebrity experts and people who are supposed to be, at the top of the thing of what they say goes because they're the celebrity expert of the moment. And it's like people are so fed up with that stuff. They want to see real people
Exactly.
having real conversations. So you bring in
Totally.
your, hey, what about, the way we've been chatting on the phone? Why aren't we bringing that into it? There are so many great shows that actually started that way. And people responding because they're like, that's actually the type of stuff I've been looking for. I'm so
Right.
sick of the other side of things that I just like, I want to hear real people having real conversations.
Yeah,
Right.
even the alternative media too. I used to watch a lot more, but it's just become all fear porn, it seems. So that's why I
Yeah,
think,
some things have gone in that direction, and then some things
yeah,
have gone, and I don't want to, but there's a few other directions as well that you've seen some things going that way, some things going that way. And then, so yeah, a lot of people getting fed up with that stuff too, on top of it.
And we don't do fear porn on the Oversharing show.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just,
No,
oh
I
no,
no,
was,
no,
no,
no.
you're
You're
good.
I
fine.
was
No,
picking up what make real conversations great again. Make,
absolutely.
Yeah, and
Totally.
I think that's why the people that listen to our show like it so much because we're so real and we're never showing any kind of fear about stuff. We just kind of I think we both accepted that there is some kind of deterministic element to this realm and then also a free will element. It's kind of woven together. And the worst that's going to happen to you is that you're going to die, and we're all going to die anyway. So,
right.
and I think that sometimes showing fear can actually lead directly to your death. So we just make fun of things
Could
most of
it
the time.
be?
Could it be? Yeah, that's why.
Right.
Absolutely. So why don't we start off with astrology, talking about a little bit about the sun, what the sun signs are, unless you had something else you wanted to chime in
Oh
about.
no, yeah, any direction you guys want to go with it, I'm down. Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe moon, sun, we can go from sun, moon, rising, which is also ascendant. And then
Right.
yeah,
Mhm.
we'll just flow.
We should definitely
Okay.
talk about Chiron too after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
sure. So I like to start out the discussion with I like to go to the roots of the symbolism of these things. Because one of the things that you see in conversations about astrology, the type of content you see, out on the internet or in other media places. Maybe there's a news website, you go to read the news, and then there's also the astrology section somewhere on the bottom of the page and all this. So the type of content you see out there, generally there's a lot of emphasis on like stereotypical type statements and also what's the other word I'm looking for? Aphorisms. And I like to go to the roots of the symbolism because then you see where those stereotypical statements and those aphorisms came from in the first place. And it gets a little deeper. And then you're like, oh, okay, so that's why people say such and such about that sign or that, position or whatever. So anyhow, going to the roots of the symbolism of it, sun and moon. So the sun is daytime consciousness. What is daytime consciousness? Daytime consciousness is when you get up early in the morning. You got to take a shower, you got to brush your teeth, comb your hair, you got to put on clean clothes and look good because you're going to go out and engage with the world. And what's the symbolism there? The way that you're seen in the light of the sun. So this is the outer part of the personality. It's the way that you're seen when you're out interacting and engaging with that part of the daytime, that part of the public that we engage with in day-to-day life. This is all taking place out in the daylight of the sun. That's the symbolism. That's where this concept comes from. So when you're looking at sun signs, we're talking about that part of that external part of your personality. This is ego, your persona, your personality, part of your personality you're projecting outwards into that world that we engage with in the day-to-day. Now the moon is the opposite. We're talking about moon. Now you're talking about nighttime consciousness. Now, what is nighttime consciousness? So after you've gone through the interactions of the day, you've got accomplishments and demands and tasks you've got to meet in the day-to-day activities of the day world. Well, what do you do at the end of that? You go retire inside the home. And then it's going to be nighttime. So this is your relationship with yourself on the inside, the internal world, your inner world that you go to. This is what the moon symbolizes in astrology. So this is that inner world, but also it's nighttime, and it's the connection to the right side of the brain. So on the right side of the brain, there's the creativity, the intuition, the imagination, also your connection to the dream time and the subconscious. Now, the sun is the opposite of that. When you're out engaged in the sun time world, the daytime consciousness world, you're engaged with things like dealing with people, going to school, going to work, solving problems, meeting tasks and accomplishments. This is the left side of the brain. This is logic, analytics. You've got to be rational. You got to be objective. So the sun is taking place in this external part of things. The moon is turned towards the inner world. So that's what the symbolism has to say about it. That's where these notions of external, internal come from with the sun and the moon placements in the astrology. So, sun, we're exploring the personality, the ego, the part you're projecting outwards. Also, it's the way that you're seen, but also the parts of yourself that you allow other people to see. And also, along with the sun, there is this notion of light. So there's also some positive association with the parts of your personality that kind of bring the light to the situation. These are some of the things associated with the sun. With the sun signs, what your sun sign represents. Your moon sign, this is your inner world, your relationship with yourself on the inside. And there's more to it, but that's the basic idea, the basic roots of the symbolism behind it. Sun and moon.
I have a question for you, because you have the same sun and the same moon.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Like, do you feel like you're pretty much the same at home as externally or outside? Or tell us about that dynamic.
Yeah, interesting. So the way that the astrologers have typically described this is, now it gets a little bit more complicated because there's also actually that has to do with other signs though. Okay, anyhow. So if you're born with sun and moon in the same sign, that means that you were born near the time of a new moon, either a little before, a little after, or if they're totally conjunct, then right at the time of the new moon. But it's got to be somewhere close. And, they're somewhere close together if you're born with having sun and moon in the same sign. And the way that the astrologers have typically described this is that you have some harmony between your outer self and your inner self. Tends to not be a lot of conflict. There's a lot of similarity. There tends to be a lot of harmony between the way that your outward expression and also your inner relationship with yourself. These things are, now it doesn't mean that it's all cake and ice cream or that it's all easy and good, but it means that there's a lot of similarity, a lot of harmony, in those areas of your life.
Okay. Do you find that to be true for yourself?
It rang true for me,
Okay. That's cool.
But this is the way that I kind of like to use astrology is I go and I look at what are the roots of the symbolism behind it. Because there are these kind of stereotypical statements and aphorisms that get tossed around. And I'm like, yeah, but why are people saying that about the signs? Why is that what's associated with the signs? And then go and look at the symbolism. And then you start to see, oh, okay, so it corresponds to the seasons, or it corresponds to the elements, or it's the way that the light is shining on you in the light of the day, the way that, so you start to see where it comes from. And then what I do is I say, okay, now it's a self-reflection tool. Does this actually ring true for me? Now, whether it rings true or not, the process still works because I still took the time to do this little outline and categorization of the different parts of my personality. I confronted the different things about my personality. I started looking at my strengths and my weaknesses, places where I have character deficits or flaws, places where I have talents or abilities. I'm taking in the whole picture now. Now I can start to do that process of the inner work and the inner healing, which is like that stuff we've been talking about, earlier in the show, taking responsibility for your own stuff, pointing the finger out there. That means there's three fingers pointed back at you. Yeah, but what about taking responsibility for your own stuff? So regardless of how perfectly it rings true or not, it is still an exercise. It's a self-reflection tool. It is still an exercise of confronting the different aspects of myself, all these types of things. And beyond that, I don't even worry too much about, is astrology real? Is it true? In the true sense of what can really be true, of trueness of the true reality. And I'm just like, it doesn't even bother me. I'm not even, but the thing that I find interesting about it is as I started to do this work with astrology, the way that the symbolism would lay out and the way that it would take me through this process of doing the self-reflection, confronting the different parts of myself and working with it, I was like, uh, who or how many people or how long of work was put into this, because it is intelligent and brilliant beyond like what I would have expected when I first started going into the topic, when I didn't quite know totally what I was just curious, just learning, just, as I started to go deeper into it, it started to get more and more brilliant as I was going along. And I'm like, who came up with this? This is brilliant. Like, which then takes me around to that side of things. The people who say that it is real, I'm like, I think I'm kind of leaning towards with them. Even though I said I don't want to touch that topic of how real is it or is it real or not. I'm not really interested in that, debate or but I do tend to lean more towards the side of things of the people who think it's real. Yeah, you can put me in that camp, because the more I've worked with it, the more brilliant and intelligent the system appears to me. And I'm just like, hey, I don't know. This is really something.
Wow, you made me think of several questions. So, and we don't have to get to all of them right now, but one of the things that I thought of was when you say like who invented all this stuff is it makes me think of like, okay, fine, you have the sun, the moon, and you have the astrology, you have the zodiacal, the 12 signs of the zodiac. And you have these meanings that you can associate with those, with the different planets. But then it's like, well, there's a new thing. There's Chiron, and then there's Lilith, and then there's and it's like, who said those were something? Like,
right,
who invented, like, who, do you know? Because
some of it, yes, and some of it, no. But I also have confronted some of that, and even have a little voice in the back of my mind, like, who is going to tell these people to knock it off? We don't need more objects. You just added 12 more and 15 more. Like, come on, man. Like, it's too many now,
Right. I get it. It is.
And then some of them, you go and study it and it overlaps with other information that's already been laid out in astrology.
Yeah.
And you're like, now you're repeating the same concept again, but with a different name.
Yeah.
And
you wonder if they're muddying the waters or something, like.
Yeah, like, maybe there could even be something like that going on. On that, I have no idea, but yeah, it starts to get to be a point where I'm just like, somebody needs to tell them to knock it off now. Like, okay, for a while it was great, we needed a few more, and then it was building up, and then it started to get too many. I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? There's too many now.
Yeah, it's a lot. And something else you said made me think of, like, when you said, even if it doesn't resonate for you, like you looked into it and you recognize that it doesn't, right? Like, yeah. And maybe that's because either we change over time, like, just because you are in this, specific sun sign, it doesn't mean that, and that sun sign has some of these like potentially negative traits or whatever. What if you just aren't prone to those things? Or what if you just learned not to, be that way, and you've changed and you've grown? That's possible, and that's why we look at these things, so that we can grow, so that we can know ourselves better, and we can tackle some of those things. Like, I do know, like, Virgos tend to be a little bit like you shy, in the sense of like, maybe like you didn't want to be in front of a video camera on, but that was something that was you then, but you've overcome that, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that also takes it to some other areas of the conversation. As you start to learn more about how it works, you start to find out about other positions. There's other planets. There's aspects between there's so many other things that are happening. Also, like you said, people change over time. So there's also things like your chart may have progressed. Sometimes people go and look at their progressed chart and find out, like, wow, that really does describe pretty well the way that I changed, the way that I am no longer the way that I was then, and then I'm at a different place now. And so, yeah, there's also transits, and there's all kinds of different, progressed chart would take a look at planets, where they've progressed to. For example, I was born a sun and moon Virgo, but if you look at my progressed chart, I am now a sun Libra, according to progressed chart.
Okay, I've never heard of this. It's like, what's this about? Because I do still have another question for you, but
So
I
it's
want to
just
hear about.
as you get to be a certain age, the way that these positions have changed, then
If you were to be born
you
again
track
on the same
these.
day, or what?
Okay, so the details of that I'm not entirely sure about
Okay.
because I've never actually. So there's a couple of different things. There's learning how to read charts. There's also learning how to cast charts, and I've never learned how the progressed charts are
Okay.
created. Like if I was going to sit down and do it with no computer and no help from software,
Okay.
and I was going to do the real thing, you know, all the way through. So there are certain things that I do know how to do that for, and certain things I don't in astrology.
It's
And
okay.
so, and if you can construct like a whole entire natal chart, you know how to do every single planet, you know how to do the nodes, you know how to do like the whole thing, then you know that's like decades of study to be able to do that, and that's very impressive. Someday I'll come back on the show when I know how to do that, and I'll tell you. But anyhow,
Okay.
progress chart, I don't even know exactly how it's done, but I do know the basic general concept though, which is that has your chart progressed? Has your sun and your moon and have your signs shifted to a new place? Now, what determines at what age do you have to be where it's not just the movement of because the planets are always moving around. So it's not just, for example, we're leaving Leo season, we're about to go into Virgo season. That's not enough to say a person went from, Leo to Virgo. It's something that's over a longer period of their life. As you get to a certain age, you start to reach some of these milestones of certain things in your chart having progressed to the next thing. But exactly how it's done, I don't actually know.
Okay. Well, that's very, very interesting. But it also kind of leads me to the next question, which I thought of earlier. And in fact, I thought I might have thought of this before and I forgot to write it down. So I'm glad it came back up. Did you ever read Michael Tsarion's book, Cards on Houses, I think?
No, I never heard of that one.
Oh my, well, okay. I haven't even finished. I haven't even started. I went into the intro probably and I was just like, so I haven't, it's like, it's been sitting there and I haven't finished it. But basically, he doesn't follow any of the stuff that is like, whatever now. Like, it's not tropical, it's not sidereal, it's not Vedic. He made up his own and he calls it tarot scopes or something like that.
Okay, yeah, I've seen some of the tarot scopes content.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna have to read that book because I actually just recently started doing some work on matching up some of the. Actually, this is what I did. So I haven't looked at tarot in a really long time, and I was like, oh, I need to revisit and brush up on this again. It was fun and interesting, when I did it before. It's been a really long time since I looked at it. Has a lot of overlap with astrology. It's actually a really good tool for remembering certain concepts and also learning new concepts and stuff. But anyhow,
I
what I
think
started
Michael
doing
Tsarion makes
was
that very point. And
okay.
that's what
Yeah.
this book is about. I'm pretty sure. So go ahead.
Yeah. Excellent. So then, what I started doing was taking certain things in my natal chart and illustrating them using tarot cards. So, for example, I did my midheaven, and I
I
did
don't
some of
know
the.
what that is.
Yeah, it's okay. So, but I took a position and I laid out a little picture. What does it look like in tarot? Instead of writing up words to say this is this placement and what it means is blah 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 blah. I also did words afterwards, but I said, what is it going to look like in picture form? And I wanted to brush up on tarot anyhow, and this is was a little exercise to match some of these things up. And then I said, oh, so I actually accidentally came up with this idea and started doing it. And then I also did my Chiron placement, and I did both of these. I did an illustration. What does it look like in picture form using tarot cards? And then I also wrote a little text summary description of what you're looking at when you're looking at the tarot card picture.
Yeah,
Now I
I
lost my
saw
train of
you
thought. Why
do.
did
I
I bring
saw
that
that
up?
on the Telegram.
Oh, you saw that one. Okay.
Yeah, it's cool. Keep going. Keep talking. Keep chatting.
Well, now I lost my train of thought and I forgot why I brought that up. I mean,
Oh
I know you were
gosh,
talking about
darn it.
Michael Tsarion and
The
his work on the
the
houses and the cards. Maybe that's what it
Yeah.
was. I think I was going to ask because it sounded to me like, oh, this must be the correspondence between tarot. What do you say? Cards must be talking about tarot cards and the houses of
Mhm.
the zodiac.
Yeah, I believe the book is called Cards on Houses.
I'm
And
going to have to read that.
yeah, and I'm gonna have to read it too because I've only like when after I read him after I read what he said, it just in that first section of the book, I was just like my mouth dropped open and I just never pulled my mouth back together. So I haven't finished it, but I was just to me, he's talking about, if I remember correctly, he's basically saying back in the day, people didn't have computers, they didn't have
Right.
astro.com, they couldn't just type shit in, and they didn't have to know the exact, like, they didn't have to go in and type in, oh, I was born here at this date at this time.
Right.
No, because like when they were born, they knew. I don't even know if I'm saying this correctly, but
No, it makes perfect sense. I
basically
mean,
it's like, how do
you would be looking at a sundial that you had laid out and the horizon, and you'd be looking at what you were actually seeing and saying. And then the time the person was born, you know, you could do it off of a sundial, but they might have not been concerned with writing down the time. They were looking at here's the sundial, here's the position of the shadow, there's what's rising on the horizon. And you could lay the whole rest of the thing out from there without even having like a digital time like 11:46 p.m. or
right, right. And basically he's the his method, I guess, teroscopes, and I may be chopping that up, so don't quote me, but his method is going back to that. I think he's trying to
Yeah.
go back to that versus the whole like, tropical, and I still don't even understand the difference between tropical, sidereal, Vedic, and all that stuff, but
Yeah. So
if you
the
do, please
well
explain.
there's a bit of a problem because of the precession of the equinoxes. Tropical and sidereal do not match up. And then also it's changing all the time because of the precession of the equinoxes. So there
So does tropical always stay the same regardless? Is that what
in a
it is?
certain sense it does because tropical, it's all about the seasons and it's oriented to the seasons. And it was laid out, at a time when Aries matched up with the spring equinox. Because of the precession of the equinoxes, there's a shift happening where it's shifting away from that point. And so if you're going to look at the position of the stars in the sky and the position where the constellations are, then in Western tropical astrology, they don't totally match up to the positions the way they did back when the system was laid out, when you had the spring equinox and Aries,
Okay.
perfectly lined up because it was lined up from there. But this actually isn't of a concern to people practicing Western astrology because they're not concerned with the true position of the constellation in the sky, because signs and constellations are not the exact same thing. These are overlapping related things, but it's not the same exact thing. So because in Western tropical, you're concerned with the movement of the seasons.
See, that's
And
okay.
the
See,
signs are
and
describing that. So you're not really worried that it's not totally matching up and that things have shifted since that time way back when.
thank
Now,
you so
I'm not a
much for
total
that.
expert on sidereal. I know way less about that because I haven't studied it. I do all my studies in Western tropical.
Okay.
But even within, so for example, if you go to astro.com and you go to their extended chart features where you can select other options
Mhm.
and you go into sidereal, they're going to ask you which, I don't know how to pronounce this word, Ayanamsa, do you want? And what they're asking you there is, where do you want to put down 0 degrees Aries? Because that's going to lay out the whole rest of the thing. And then when you click the drop down thing to select your options, there's more than like 50 different options. So people talk about, like, I sometimes hear people talking as if sidereal is this unified thing where everybody's in agreement that it goes this way when you're talking sidereal. And I'm like, yeah, but then why do they have 50 different ionopsis? They don't even agree on where to put 0 degree Aries. So
Jesus. 50
now,
different places.
I mean, it's all going to be real similar concepts, and it's not going to make this big, huge difference if you lay it out one way or another, unless you are like really deep into a school of thought that's doing things a certain way or whatever. But anyhow, just to, you know, uh, I wanted to kind of poke a prick into that balloon of the idea that people, and this is usually not even astrologers who talk like this, but you hear a lot of people talking like there is this unified school of thought called sidereal, and they all agree the way that that's all supposed. And I'm like, no, sidereal has got all these different competing ideas as well, you know. But yeah, that's the basic difference. Western, it's all about Western tropical. It's all about the movement of the seasons, and precession of the equinoxes. It's not lining up the way that it did in the past when it was laid out. And sidereal, they are concerned with the true position of the stars as they appear in the sky. Also, there's a lot of emphasis in like some of these Eastern systems that and I'm totally not an expert on this, so people can fact check me, don't quote me, but some of the stuff that falls under the umbrella of like Vedic, Hindu, Indian, and sidereal also has a lot of overlap with these categories. There's a lot of emphasis on the moon sign, which I actually really like about that, because I think moon sign is a lot of great information there. But a lot of emphasis on the moon, also emphasis on, you know, position as it appears in the sky.
Okay. Well, I just want to emphasize that I'm so very grateful for you explaining that, because no one had like boiled it down so simply to me that, and here we go, I never knew this, that astrologically the zodiac, the stars, whatever you want to call them, are not lined up with the seasons. I did not freaking know that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
like,
they are kind of lined up, but what there is there's this shift that happens. So
of the precession, right? Of
yeah. And you know, should I talk about what precession is, or
please keep
okay,
yes.
in case it's a
in
new
case somebody
concept or
doesn't
whatever.
know.
So, you know, the Earth is tilted on its axis, and as it is traveling around, you know, when you spin a top, how it'll spin like upright, but then it'll start to wobble. If you've spun a top, you'll see it's spinning like perfectly upright, but then it'll start to spin like this. So the axis of the Earth, the way that it's tilted, it actually has a wobble to it that goes around like this. And for it to complete one cycle like that, I wonder, if I hold it this way, it looks like you can maybe see it better. Okay. So for it to do one complete wobble like that is about 26,000 years. And in, like, you know, Plato, this was called like the Platonic year, or the great year. This was the big, huge cycle, you know, the big one that took 26,000 years to go that way. So anyhow, there was a time when this Western tropical system was laid out with Aries sitting, the beginning of Aries sitting perfectly at the spring equinox. But because of this shift that's happening, it has shifted away from that point, and all of the way that we see the constellations up in the sky, that has all shifted off from where these exact boundaries, where do you put a boundary line to cut off where one sign begins and another one ends? You know, there's no actual boundary, so we kind of have to just map things out and well, you know, it's here, let's split it up that way. But then because of this precessional movement, things have shifted away from those positions. They're not super far off, but they're not exactly lined up the way that they were when the system was laid out way back when, you know.
Right. And as I understand it, it's like a wheel. And so, you know, it's shifting ever so slight, like 1 degree every 72 years or
yes,
something like that.
71.6. And in a lot of ancient mythology, they rounded up to 72, and you will see the numbers 72, 108, 26 or 25,000 something. These numbers get repeated in the mythology a lot, but in different forms where you don't, on the surface, you might not realize they're actually talking about what's happening in the sky clock. So, you know,
when you're reading books and stuff and they mention these numbers, it's actually tying things back to the sky clock.
Yeah, there's like layers of meaning. So there's more than just one. So there's the surface level meaning of what's happening in the story. But then you look at the numbers and you're like, oh, they're playing with processional numbers. So it's a way to remember processional numbers. And then, you know, and the 72 names of God and just all these different things. You know, the 108 appearing in Eastern philosophy of
Yeah, and
Eastern
I don't have a
cultures and
mala on today, but like the 108 beads on a mala,
right,
on a
exactly.
necklace mala thing.
And then
Yeah.
the 72 and the 108 are supplementary. Together they make 180, but it's also the way that you lay out a pentagram. You need 72 and 108 to lay out pentagons and pentagrams. And Venus traces a pentagram if you map out the movement on the Earth, and you carry it
Okay.
through over its
Okay,
like
yeah.
full cycle over like something like 7 point something years, close to 8 years. Venus will make like a pentagram. 72 and 108 are pentagram pentagonal numbers as well. And there's so
Yeah.
much you know going on with that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting. There was something else I was gonna say, but now I forgot. Brandon,
Well,
any comments?
I was going to say like the 72 virgins that you allegedly get, right?
Right. So
You
you
always
see
hear
these
about that.
numbers,
Yeah.
they're always appearing all over the place. That's a funny one though.
Yeah. I just did want to say that I have read that book, Cards on Houses. It was quite some time ago. It was a few years ago. So I definitely want to read it again. But I think pretty much everything Sharon said, you nailed it with that. It's pretty accurate. That's how Michael Tessarian does it. And even watching him, because when I was watching him at the time, he would have different astrologers on, and he would even say he doesn't know so much about the astrology, but he knows more about the symbolism and about tarot and all this different stuff. And that's how he does his readings. He lays cards on the houses and stuff. So yeah, it's super interesting, definitely.
Yeah, I'd like to look into
And
that some more. And it was interesting that you brought up kind of that he might also be going through a process of kind of like reconstructing things like, all right, tropical, sidereal, the rest of it. Like, I'm just going to start from scratch. I'm going to start building. And you do see more people doing this nowadays because just like anything else, everything in the world of information, you start to really dig in and you start to find out that there are some things that accidentally got distorted over time, some things intentionally so, some things are hidden, suppressed, covered up. You got other things that are distorted on purpose, other things that just kind of accident. But there is this, we know that the information we're getting, it's kind of the time has been right for this. This has been happening in a lot of the communities I'm seeing interacting on social media and other places. So many conversations in so many different areas of thought happening where people are talking about we need to start from scratch rebuilding our knowledge about the world because so much of it has been manipulated and distorted and got mixed about along the way that let's start rebuilding it again. We got to rebuild the truth again.
Yeah.
right.
And I remember also Michael Tessarian said that what he found is back in the day, there was this one ancient science and it was basically split up. Like, and we've talked about this on another episode, but you had astrology, tarot, Kabbalah, all this stuff was just all one science. Alchemy and all that stuff was all part of it. And then it was chopped up. And then this tribe got this, astrology, this tribe got this. And so that's his other mission too, is to put it all together. So I like that you said that because I think that is the proper way to do it. And also, like we said earlier, not to take it too seriously and to really follow your intuition about it, because you'll know if something's right if you're tuned in and you're not lying to yourself. You're going to know what resonates and what makes sense. And so you could take what works and then you just let the rest go. And that's just an internal thing, though. This is something I found on my journey. Every time I meet somebody or I listen to them and their point of view, I have to remember that just because they might think a certain way, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. That's their truth from their point of view. So I honor that. And then I just take in what works for me instead of criticizing them about it. I'm just like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Like, no matter what it is, even if it comes to seeing like powers and stuff, like someone's like, I saw a monk levitate or whatever. And I'm like, all right, cool. Or I saw a flying saucer in the sky. Who am I to say that they didn't,
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What a great attitude. That's a great attitude to have towards that. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a great approach. Let them speak their piece. And one of the things that I think about sometimes is if something was true, but I was closed-minded about it and I wasn't picking up on it. If it really, really is true, it's going to come back around again later.
Yeah.
And maybe
Wow,
that time I'll be a little smarter and I'll let it come in, if I
Right.
didn't pick it up the first time, and that other people are going through this process as well. And then also other people are going through some of the same processes I've gone through before, where there were times when I thought for sure something was true. later found out I was off base, and so, you got to be willing to be flexible and engage yourself in this process of updating your perspective and your viewpoint as you're going along. Nobody's got the full bulletproof truth 100% nailed down. Everybody's dealing with this process of, I've got some of the parts, some of the things fitting together. I've got some other things that I know were, distorted, and I'm working through this process of sifting through, and everybody's going through this process of working through it, and so you don't want to get too upset or judgmental about somebody who might, and also if they're off base on something, even if they're way off base, the truth is never not the truth. Eventually they are going to see it sometime later down the road. If it really is true, it's going to come back around. Everything gets a return,
Yeah. And you could still learn, especially from somebody's personal experience. Like we talked a lot about this around episode 11 and 1111. We talked a lot about division, and I found that that's one of the things that I really don't want to engage in is any kind of division. So I'll just listen to somebody about it and then maybe try to give them a little bit of my point of view. But we've quoted this before, and something Ram Dass said, and he was like, if somebody can sense on any level that you're not accepting them, then they're just going to put up their walls. So if you just outright tell them they're wrong, or even if your just demeanor changes or whatever. So I'm just like, all right, like I've had people tell me some way whacked out, far out stuff, but I'm just like, right on, man. Like, I don't know. Sure.
Right. I don't need to make a judgment here and now as to whether or not the thing was true. I'm going to, I've seen enough crazy things in my lifetime that who knows, maybe it was true. Nothing wrong with saying, okay, maybe so.
Right, absolutely. And that's we say that a lot here on the show. We say, we just say, like, could it be?
Maybe.
Very well could be.
Maybe.
We don't know. We don't know a lot. There's a lot we don't know. But going back to the discussion we were having on the signs of the zodiac and whatnot. I don't know if you've ever heard Crow 777 talk about a book called The Worship of Augustus Caesar.
No.
I brought it up on the Ashley Lanise show that we had. I don't know if you've finished watching that one, but it's a book where Crow said he read that book and it was very, very interesting to him. I haven't read it myself, but he says that it talks about how there used to only be 10 signs of the zodiac. It was broken. The sky was broken up into 10 sectors versus the 12 that we have. And somehow that made numerical sense in a better way than dividing it by 12. So I think the great year, because of that, the numbers that we're using today were actually the numbers for when it was broken up into 10 signs of the zodiac. So when you actually multiply, what is it, the 2160 by 10, or it's something like that.
Yeah, that's it.
For the great year, then you get...
actually, the great year is about 26,000 years.
Right.
But if you're going to go through, how long does it take for this shift that's happening? Like we said, 1 degree every 71. I think it's
2160.
Well, wait, listen, I got it. So 1 degree every 71.6 years, which often gets rounded up to 72. Okay. And then how long does it take to transit all the way through one full sign of the zodiac if you've got it split up into 12? That takes 2,160 years to go through one full sign. That's where the 2160 comes from.
Oh, right. You're right. You're right. Right. Okay. So
and anyway, then 12 times the 2160 gives you the whole entire around.
Okay. Thanks for that reminder. Because what essentially it ended up breaking down to was that it was actually 1800 years, not 2160, based on. So the math came out a little different, but it actually like makes a lot of sense. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know. I haven't read the book. But it did sound kind of interesting.
Well, I haven't read that book, so I don't know if this is why, but I think I might have an idea why it might have been split up that way, which is that before the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which would require telescopes, then you had 10 major bodies of the sky, because you had the planets that were visible plus the sun and the moon, and then you add that all together and that makes the 10.
That makes
And
lots more
but
sense.
now there's other things too going on, which is like, okay, there's different base systems you can use in math. And the Babylonians, who did a lot of work in astrology, and a lot of the Western tropical tradition has a lot of overlap with some of that information that came out of that world of astrology. And also the Babylonian math and the Babylonian world has some influence in the modern domain as well. They did everything base 60, and 12 is a multiple of 6. And with base 60, that's also where you get the 360 degrees around a circle. So they split the circle into 360 degrees. They did base 6 and base 60 math, which is where you get the 12. Splitting the wheel up into 12 zodiac signs, the clock into 12 hours. We split our hours up into 60 minutes and 60 seconds. This is all Babylonian math, is what that goes back to.
God.
And so when I tell people about other bases of math, like in school, you learned base 10. And then people are like, other bases, I can't do that. I'm like, actually, you can. You've been doing it your whole life. When you do the clock, you're doing base 60. You're doing base 12 and base 60. When you're doing degrees, you're doing 60 and 360 and all the combinations of that. So you actually do know other bases of math. You might have just not been consciously aware of it. I actually used to teach math for a while. If my math is if the math teacher's coming out, you guys can tell me to calm down or whatever.
No, you're fine. That was great because
you just blew Sharon's mind.
Yes. Choo choo.
Well, it's fun to blow minds, and it's fun to have your mind blown. And that's another reason why we do these conversations, because it's just so much fun to meet new people, because it's like, we love novelty, and you always know that like it's not going to happen every single time, but you always know there's the potential, the chance. Somewhere around the corner, somebody's going to bring out something I never heard of, and I'd be like, thank you. I was looking for something new and exciting, and I just had not heard of that.
Yeah.
It's fun to open those new doors.
And
that is awesome because and Brandon, if you had anything to say, I was just going to bring up
go ahead.
How what he talked about with the Babylonian stuff. It's just reminding me of what Jason Brashears of Archaics has been talking about. I don't know if you've come across his channel or his work, but it's really, really very, 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 very interesting right now. And he's talking about how the Bible was put together and how it's really from the stuff that was in the Babylonian libraries of all the works of all the people that were nearby. And we're talking Hittites, Ugaritic, Akkadians, you name it. All these people had books in that library, and a certain tribe of people who put the Old Testament together. The history shows that what he's actually looked into, it shows that they corroborated, co-opted those narratives of pieces that they liked and put it into and wrote themselves into it. I'm the messenger.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but this
actually shows up in biblical studies, biblical history, but also in the history of Judaism, because there is a period of Babylonian captivity.
Exactly.
And during that period of Babylonian captivity is when a lot of what the Bible that we have today, there's a lot of stuff that comes from that time period, and we don't know, we can't go back in time, so we don't know exactly the process. What we do know is that there was this period of Babylonian captivity, which is a big topic in biblical studies and in Judaic studies and history of Judaism. They discuss these topics and what the nature of the Bible is we have inherited it today, and what impact this Babylonian captivity had. And that a lot of the writing and editing and translating and putting things together, that there was a lot of activity that happened at that time period.
Right. And what I find absolutely hilarious is that people will be like, well, I'm escaping Babylon, and hey, I used to say it too, but you're reading Babylon. You're reading anything that has 12 is based in Babylonian stuff. That's all there's 12s all over the Bible, all over, and like the base 60 and all that stuff, the time that you're keeping and all this stuff, everything's Babylonian. So what you gonna do now? It's like, it's just funny. Oh man.
Yeah, I think the demonization of things is because there was probably something good there, you know.
I
So everyone's like they hate Babylon, but there's probably
concur.
something good about Babylon that they're not aware of. What I was gonna say in regards to the 10 zodiac signs and now there's 12, I think that could also have something to do with the level of human consciousness at the time. You know, I think that maybe during these different periods when there's 10 signs and not 12, it's just had maybe we just had either lower consciousness or a different consciousness or something opened or something changed within I guess I could say the collective conscious or just people's consciousness in general, and maybe we've evolved to a different level now, and that's why we have what we have. I think that might have something to do with it, because Sharon and I looked really deep into the law of one. I don't know if you're familiar with that, any of that material. It's also called the raw material, where it was a channeled being back like in the 80s, and they talked about the different consciousness levels. At one is like plants and stones, and two is like animals, and three is humans. And now we have, and it's one of the shortest ones, I guess, but it's also the one where you have free will. So I think that could kind of correspond with that as well. Just humans back when just had a different consciousness. And like you said, we discovered these planets, but maybe it was because the consciousness elevated, and that's what it was that discovered the planets that were out there. People actually put more stock into it or looking up or something like that. So it could have been, who knows, if you know, you're putting the cart before the horse, or however that goes. And then again, also with my whole feeling with prior civilizations that were probably pretty advanced that we don't know about, that were covered up, it's also possible maybe they knew about them back then too, or maybe just the priest class dealt with them, and the main people didn't know about them, or the humans that we're descended from didn't actually know about them until they were told. Maybe they're waiting for them to be ready, and now they're like, all right, here's telescopes, look, wow, look, Uranus, look at that, you know. So
I have thought some of those same things as well. Like, which way does it go, or some strange
Chicken or
combination of
the
both.
egg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or even both in some way. You know,
Yeah.
like the consciousness elevation, becoming aware of things, and you know, and then did the awareness push the discovery, or was it also being managed by, like, you know, this top class that was saying like, all right, we're not going to let the information, but now we're going to let the information out. And it's just, yeah, which way did it really go? It's so interesting.
And it's
It's
and
such an interesting
also,
point.
yeah, oh, thank you. And also, I'm not even looking at it like in a victim way. Maybe humans at the time weren't really ready, because that guy Jason from Archaics talks about like the Anunnaki or the Nephilim or whatever, these people from a different civilization that came into contact with humans that were all over the earth, but they were more, a little less advanced, I guess. So maybe that has something to do with that correlation. Maybe when they're trying to teach them the information, there's a reason why they're holding some stuff back. Maybe they weren't ready. You know, some people aren't ready for car keys yet, no matter how old they are, you know. So that's kind of how I try to look at things, because you know, I don't really look at it in a victimy way, because like I was saying earlier in the show, I think a lot of this stuff is consensual, especially when we're talking about like a controlling class or whatever it is. I feel like they can't really directly control. Maybe they've tried before and saw what happened and it didn't work out so well. So that's the only reason I want to say that.
Yeah, that's definitely, there is some kind of consent thing going on for sure. And it's almost like we've got a bunch of these things kind of coexisting. So like, yeah, there is this um controlling, domineering type thing, but then are you consenting to it? And there's big thing, and then we also got free will, and then there's certain things that seem determined, and it's like all of these things are kind of playing together at once. And it's, but I do think there is something going on with that consent thing, and also what you brought it up earlier, what you're giving your energy to, you know. You could almost be opening the door and bringing things in, which also goes along with this idea of consent, you know, or the way that you are choosing to navigate through things. You know, there's going to be a different flow of energy in your domain depending on how you navigate. And one person might be thinking that the reality of something domineering or controlling them is just so incredibly strong they just can't even perceive outside of that. There's no way you're going to convince me that there's not so. And it's like, yeah, well, you're also consenting to it, so you're also bringing some of that in. So
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
that's another reason why you're having such a hard time seeing that it could possibly not be like all powerful or all controlling, you know.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of what happened in 2020. We don't like to say exactly because we don't want our channel taken down, but
Right.
all that craziness that happened in 2020, because a lot of people around me, I mean, I refused to cover my smiling face, as did Sharon, and she ended up getting terminated from her job. For me, it was a little different, but I would talk to friends that agreed with me, but yet we would walk in a store and they would still cover their face, and I would be in there and I wouldn't, and I would explain to them, and I used to get me upset and I'd be very frustrated. But now I understand it's just they're not ready for that level of either confrontation or standing away from the crowd or whatever it is. To them, it isn't a choice. To them, it's something they have to do. So that exactly reminds me of what you said. Yeah.
And it provides compassion. Like you can see them compassionately and
Yeah.
not have to like woke rape them, as we say.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
One thing I did want to get in before this is over is, so in the beginning we were talking about the different symbolism of the sun sign and the moon sign. How does that correspond with the rising sign?
Okay, so rising sign brings in another. So this is like the big three in
Yeah,
astrology. You're
that's
supposed
why
to
I
learn
wanted to
your,
cover that one. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
there's like more topics to learn as well, and there's more things going on. But it's
And
like
if you want to
there's
talk
three that
about
are considered like
houses,
part of your sign. Oh yeah, yeah. This actually,
does it tie into the houses? It does.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
You
perfect.
have excellent timing today because that actually you have to start with that to get into the discussion of houses. Anyhow,
Wow.
so it's like
Perfect.
that leads right into it. So yeah, it's like the big three in astrology. You know, it's like you've got three signs: your sun sign, your moon sign, and your ascendant sign. So when you're born, there's whatever the position of the sun and the moon are, and that's your sun sign and that's your moon sign. There's also an ascendant sign, and this is at the time that you're born, there is a sign that's rising on the eastern horizon, and that's what is the ascendant or the rising sign, and these are two different terms for the same thing. So some people call it rising sign, some people call it ascendant. But what it is at the time that you're born, there is this sign that's rising up on the eastern horizon at the time that you're born. That's your ascendant sign. That's your rising sign. Now, what this is like if I'm gonna lay out a natal chart, where do I put the horizon? And the horizon is the position where you put the ascendant. And actually, interesting little anecdote with this. Manly Palmer Hall said that the Pythagoreans believed that the sign rising on the eastern horizon at the time that a person was born, that this indicated information about past life. So, because they were believers in reincarnation.
Yeah.
And but anyhow, so interesting little historical.
I like that.
I didn't know that.
There.
I like that.
I think some of this, now there's a lot of different schools of thought and approaches in astrology. So depending on which one a person is into, sometimes it picks up some of these notions of things like reincarnation, past lives, karma, and other topics. It's not universal to all systems, but you will find some of these topics do come up, depending what system you choose to study or what you're oriented towards or whatever. But anyhow, so there's a sign that's coming up on the eastern horizon at the time that you're born. That's called the ascendant or rising sign. There's also this business of where do we put the horizon in the natal chart? And that's the ascendant marks the beginning, or marks the place where you put that eastern horizon. Now on the western horizon is called the descendant, and that's the sign that's going down into the horizon at the time that you're born. And
would they be opposites?
Yeah, they're opposites. Okay. Yeah. And now this also takes us into the discussion of houses, because the other thing that the ascendant does, and also where do I put the horizon in the natal chart when I'm making a natal chart? This lays out the beginning of the first house. It's like, where do you set the boundaries for this first house? The ascendant rising sign is the first house. And where do I put the starting point? And that's where the ascendant tells me. The ascendant says that it starts here, and then there's your first house, and then all of the other houses you count 1 to 12, and that takes you around to all the rest of them. Now, that's why you actually have to learn 2 systems of houses in astrology, because there is one ordering of the houses, which is according to the seasons. And that says that at the spring equinox is the beginning of Aries, and Aries is the first house, and then I count all the rest 1 to 12 until I get to Pisces 12 at the end. That's the seasons. And that order always starts with Aries and always ends with Pisces, and that's the beginning of the year in Western astrology. Begins at Aries, begins at the spring equinox. Oh, did I lose you guys?
Nope.
No, we're here.
Oh, okay. All right. I got a little battery warning or whatever.
Oh,
And
okay.
But anyhow, okay. So got to learn 2 orderings of the houses in astrology. One of them is the order according to the seasons. Aries begins at spring equinox. That's 1. Count around to 12. Pisces at the end. Now, the other ordering is according to your natal chart. And depending on what sign was coming up on the eastern horizon at the time that you're born, your first house, your first sign might not be Aries. It might be something else. Whatever sign it is, though, that's your first house, that's your first sign, and then you count all the rest of the signs around. So then you got to learn, how does the order in my natal chart compare to the order of the seasons? And if you're born with Aries coming up on the eastern horizon, then your order is the same. And then you've got this interesting little harmony between the seasonal order and your order, and they're the same. But for a lot of people, it's not the same. And then you go through this business of learning the order of your natal chart compared to the order according to the seasons, and there's interesting information that comes out according to that. And to talk about what do houses mean in astrology, what does that represent? So I touched upon some of that, what it comes from. There's 2 systems, why you got to learn these 2 systems. But what are these houses? So they are also associated with stages of life. So Aries, beginning of the year, this is the beginning, this is being born. A lot of us are born head first. Aries, the ram with the horns, it's, with the headbutts, headbutt, get out of my way is Aries. And that's being born. It's also the beginning of the year in Western astrology, because the sun goes to the death of the winter at the winter solstice. And then it comes back to life. The days start to get longer. The plants and the trees start to regreen again, and the animals come back to high activity. Springtime, everything comes back to life. So that's the beginning of the year in Western astrology. And this is the rebirth of the sun. The sun's born again, but it's also being born. The mission of Aries is being born and stepping out and saying, here I am. I'm me and here I am. This is the first house. This is Aries. Now you go around to the other stages of life. What you can do, one easy way to do this is split it up into 4 quadrants. So you've got the circle, you've got 12 signs that go around the circle. If you split it into 4 pie pieces, then you've got 3 in each quadrant. The first 3 are from birth until like early childhood. And this is all about, being born, stepping out, here I am, but also starting to get to know yourself and your body, getting comfortable in your body and the physical dynamic. You're starting to confront things about, your identity and getting to know yourself. But it's all, when you're a child, when you're that young stage of childhood, you don't have the social awareness yet. It's all about you and your own little world and getting to know what's going on there. Then you go into the next quadrant. The next 3 signs takes you into the social domain. Now we're starting to be old enough to start to interact with and understand the information that's coming back from our engagement with other people, the social fabric of life and what's going on there. Then you go to the next stage of life, the next 3 after that, and this has to do with things like expanding out into the world, building up your career, your public reputation, and getting engaged in the social networks of life. But in terms of things that have to do with like networking, career, working with people, what kind of work and service are you bringing to the world and putting out there into the world? And then the last quadrant, the last 3 signs, is going to be the spiritual domain. Now you're going towards the now you're aging, your body's getting older, you're realizing that at some point your physical body's going to die and your soul and spirit's going to go on to whatever comes next. And now you're starting to go towards that process of letting go of this life and moving on to what comes next, which is engagement into the spiritual. So the order of what they call houses in astrology is that each of the signs is associated with a number 1 to 12, but these are also associated with stages of life. And I did a little brief summary splitting it up into like 4 quadrants, but each of the individual 1 through 12 is like a specific stage of life.
That breaking down into the quadrants is much more helpful. I'm going to have to go back and listen to what you just said. But yeah, thank you. Because that's a better way, I think, to think of it than to like have to memorize, okay, 1 is about this, 2 is about this, 3. It kind of helps kind of generalize. I think better that way.
Yeah, some good context there.
Big picture.
Yeah, definitely. So, but getting back to the rising and the ascendant sign, what does that actually represent for a person?
Oh, right. So I didn't get to that part.
Oh,
So
no,
we
that's
talked
okay.
about,
That's
I'm
okay.
glad you reminded me. So we talked about sun and moon, your external self and your internal world. So where does ascendant fit into the picture? So because this is associated with the first house, which in the order of the seasons is Aries, that's the beginning. And so this is being born. This is emerging into the world. Here I am. This is also each of the houses, like we said, it's associated with a stage of life. You could also think of it as being associated with kind of like a mission or a quest. And the mission of the first house is getting to know your identity. So getting in touch with like, who am I? What do I stand for? Where do I stand? And in the case of Aries, Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars has to do with willpower. It's masculine energy. It is the momentum and energy and drive that you put into things. When you need to put some punch and some momentum into things, you harness that willpower. That's what the fire represents in astrology: earth, air, water, fire. Fire is spirit and willpower. And being ruled by Mars, it is also that sometimes in life it's necessary to have a little bit of fight. That you have to be able to this is where I stand. This is who I am. I'm standing up here and I'm going to stand up for where I stand. This is Aries and Mars energy. And so the ascendant has to do with some of those characteristics, but it also has to do with the physical body, especially the head and the face, because Aries, the head with the ram's horns. But the physical body generally is associated with the ascendant. So this carries information like things about your physical appearance, what type of body type you have. Are you slender? Are you round? Are you, different body types? What kind of energetic level do you have? You find out a lot of information about these things when you look at your ascendant sign and what that represents. Also, the way that your body responds to healing. Now, here's another big piece of the thing with the ascendant. And I'm going to borrow a little bit from a couple different astrologers here because I think that they summarized it so well. I'm going to borrow some of their terminology. So one of them is the astrologer Roland Legrand, who heads the Abeles School of Astrology. And I took a course recently with that program. But the way that he described the ascendant and that it relates to the physical body, what body type that you have, he calls it the existential vehicle. Now, this takes me around to another interesting anecdote that I heard recently, which is there is a channel on YouTube called Constellations and Conversations. And she has a lot of good astrology content, but especially regarding ascendant and regarding my ascendant, which is why I took such an interest in her channel. But she said that, you guys familiar with the video game Mario Kart? At the beginning of Mario Kart, you have to select a car. You got different options. You can pick this one, you can pick that. She said, this is like the ascendant. You're picking your car. You're picking that existential vehicle that you're stepping into this world into.
Oh, I like that.
That's funny.
She took it another level beyond that. And this is something you'll see. There's a lot of different approaches to these topics in astrology, and you'll sometimes see different perspective, different ways of interpreting things. But something that's common to a lot of these is a notion of the ascendant representing something like kind of like tinted glass or like sunglasses or a tinted window pane, where your vision and perspective of the world is colored by what your ascendant sign represents. So when you go and look at your ascendant sign, you get some extra information about your outlook, your perspective on life and on the world. What is your approach to solving problems? What is your approach to the way that you go out and do things and get things done? What is your approach to, again, Aries emerging out into the world? Here I am. What is your approach to life? What is your approach to handling accomplishments, difficulties, setbacks, all different circumstances of life? What's your approach? It is colored by this window pane that you're looking through. And that's something that now something, again, Constellations and Conversations pointed this out. She said it also works the other direction. the world is looking back at you, at your approach to life, at your perspective, and they are also seeing it through that color of that tinted glass, through that ascendant sign. They are seeing these characteristics that go along with that ascendant sign. This is also part of how they perceive you and your approach to the world and your stepping out. Here I am. Some of this is what they see, is the going along with this notion of the ascendant.
Oh, I like that.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that too.
And
So
maybe, oh, go ahead, Sharon.
go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say, maybe we can give you our ascendant signs, and you could give. Is that what you were gonna say? We're so synced up, and then maybe you can give us some details about them. And why don't you go first, Sharon?
I'm a Leo rising.
Excellent. So Leo rising, that's the 5th house in astrology.
Okay.
And what I was talking about, the stages of life and the quadrants. The first quadrant takes you through the first 3 signs, and that's Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. And so that's from birth up through like some early stages of childhood. When you go into the next quadrant, now we're going into the social domain. So this is where first, now that begins with Cancer, and then goes to Leo, and then to Virgo. And so let's go to the sign before Leo real quick. Cancer is all about the home and the family environment. This is when you're a child and you're engaging with the home, the family. It has to do with your relationship with your mother, has to do with like family roots, family ancestry. So this is kind of bridging the gap in between. You're still at a stage of childhood. It's still your inner world and yourself. And it's still like, it's in the home, it's in with the family. So there's still kind of this internal stuff going on there, but you are starting to understand your relationship in regards to your position within the family and this type of thing. So it's actually kind of the beginning of this emerging understanding of like the social domain. Starts in Cancer, the sign before Leo. Now when we go into Leo, this is taking us to a stage which I would say corresponds to something kind of like sort of like preteen or even teenage years, maybe even a little bit before preteen, but roughly that range from like pre-teenage years through like the teenage years. And this is the 5th house is associated with fun and creativity and self-expression is Leo. Leo is ruled by the heart chakra. So Leo has to do with really your real true feelings on the inside, but also bringing that self-expression and bringing the spirit with it. So this is big with Leo. Now, Leo, what about that age of like pre-teenage years to early childhood? This is a stage of social development where you're starting to engage in things like after school activities. And you're starting to actually understand some of the way that you interact in the social domain and the information that's coming back. You're starting to see how do people react to my self-expression, the expression that I'm bringing to the picture. Also the creative play. A lot of team sports and after school activities and things are associated with this age and this stage of life. So this is now Leo is classically associated with fun and creative play. And so you can see with the team sports and engaging with other people, getting to know with your social group, but doing it in a way that you're like, hey, we're going out, we're having fun. We're playing sports. We're doing playful things. Think of Leo, the lion, the playful. Cats are extremely playful, but also it's associated with creativity. It's also associated with the ego because there is, again, that self-expression aspect of Leo. They are tapping into the self-expression, but also bringing it out into the social domain and seeing what kind of information comes back based on the way that they engage, react. Now, putting it on the ascendant, this is going to be, the person's going to have a healthy ego, healthy sense of self, unless there's some strong aspects doing something else in the chart. But generally speaking, ascendant in Leo, it's going to be good connection with the heart chakra. They might even tend to sometimes wear their heart on their sleeve a bit, because they've got the emotional expressiveness of that heart chakra. And they might be sometimes even a little bit over sincere in their expression, and other people are kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve a little bit. But that's because they have an authentic self-expression. They like authentic self-expression, and they're kind of saying, hey, how come I'm not getting the same from other people? Where's the sincerity? Where's the connection to the heart of things, the heart of the matter? Leo, that pumping heart chakra. Now, Leo is also fixed fire, and fixed fire has to do with so that refers to the seasonal aspect, cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Fixed is in the middle of a season, and this is about maintaining and sustaining something. And In the case of Leo, it's fixed fire. What does fire represent? That's the spirit and the willpower. So this is keeping the flame alive, keeping the spirit alive. So people who have strong Leo placements, they often tend to, they're often fun to be around, and they often respond well to when people are bringing the fun, because they're saying, hey, you're doing the job. You're bringing this, you're keeping the spirit alive. You're keeping that flame alive. That's the fixed fire. That's what I want to see happening. Let's have some more of that. So a lot of those things associated with Leo. In terms of physical appearance, Leo is often associated with physical attractiveness, especially with the hair. The Leo with the lion's mane. So you often see a lot of hair care going on, a lot of taking care of the hair, often luxurious, thick hair, even big hair sometimes. You're going to see that lion's mane coming out. So I don't know. I really I have Leo at midheaven, and I've got Venus in Leo. So roughly what that translates, I'm a big fan of Leo. So I might be overemphasizing a lot of the positive aspects here, but I can't help it because I'm kind of fascinated, and I really enjoy Leo. It's a fun topic to discuss.
Oh, thank you. And we're still kind of in Leo, aren't we? For a little bit? Yeah,
still in Leo season for a little bit more. I forget when the switches
next
it's coming up
sometime?
soon. I think it is. Maybe it's Saturday. I forget off the top of my head.
This weekend or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be this weekend. I forget.
So Brandon is actually, and before you answer Brandon, after you answer Brandon, can you tell us what midheaven means?
Oh, okay, sure. Okay. So in the order
before
of the houses, you count them around 1 to 12. And like we said, that sign rising on the eastern horizon at the time that you're born, that's in your natal chart, that's number 1. That's house number 1, first house. And then you count them all around 1 to 12. Now, when you get up to the 10th house, that's called the midheaven in astrology. So it's the same thing as the 10th house.
Okay.
And this is also what this is somewhere during the day that your person might be born at night. There are all different times a person could be born, but on the calendar day that the person is born, sometime during that day, there was a time when the sun was at its highest peak in the sky. And that's what the midheaven is. Okay. So whatever time that you're born, you might not be born at the time when the sun was in that position. But then what we do is we say on the day that you're born, at what time of day was that highest peak position? And that's where the 10th house goes, or that's what it marks out.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And that's what will show up. Like if you do your thing on astro.com, it'll tell you, if you want, it'll tell you your midheaven or whatever.
Yeah. So what it'll do. So one thing you can do is it'll have the houses numbered. You can just count them around 1 to 12.
Oh, okay.
But another thing that it'll do is there are what are called the angular houses, which are 1, 4, 7, and 10. And the first house is marked with little letters that say ASC, which is ascendant.
Uh-huh.
Then the 4th house has little letters next to it that say IC, and that means imum coli. And that means something in Latin like bottom of the sky, or but the bottom of the chart, bottom of the sky, something like that.
Okay.
Then DSC stands for the word descendant. That's the western horizon. That's the sign that was going down into the horizon at the time that you're born. And then you go up to the top at house number 10, and it's going to have a little letters next to it that say MC, and that's medium coli, which in Latin means middle of the sky or midheaven.
Okay. I'm looking at mine because I did it yesterday or the day before, because I was watching your how to do this on astro.com. So that's what I did. But I don't want to forget Brandon's ascendant. So
so my ascendant is Libra.
Yeah, like my son.
Yeah.
His ascendant is my son.
Give me one quick second. I'm getting a little power alert. I'm plugging my
Yeah. I was going to tell you earlier and I forgot. I was going to say, please plug yourself in. We don't want to lose you.
I just dropped my top to my.
And we're a little bit over the 2-hour mark, which is fine with us. I don't mind.
Yeah, we could probably wrap up with this. I mean, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny how we were talking in the beginning of the show. Well, not before we started recording, when it was just me and you on the call, you were talking about your hair.
I know that and I was telling you how crazy my hair looked, and I had to straighten it. It was driving me nuts. Yeah.
And then he
Isn't that
said that
crazy?
about the Leo. That was hilarious.
I
Very
know. That's why I
synchronistic.
was laughing.
That's great.
Okay,
He didn't.
so
Oh, okay. I don't know if he heard all that.
I plugged in.
Oh, okay.
My phone was about to die.
Okay.
So anyhow, Libra. So when we're talking about signs that are on the ascendant, again, we're associating these with there's the characteristics of the physical body, the person's physical appearance, also the way that they've emerged into the world, and then we're also talking about those characteristics of kind of colors your outlook on the world, and also the way the world is looking back at you, this type of thing. So just some things to keep in mind when we discuss the rising signs and the ascendant. But Libra is, if we're going in the seasonal order, the seventh house, which is the descendant. And this is actually one of the angular houses in astrology. So the angular houses, again, are 1, 4, 7, and 10. That's the ascendant. That's the Imum Coli, which is the fourth house. Then the seventh house is the descendant. And then the number 10 is midheaven. But anyhow, the seventh house, which is Libra, when I was talking about that part of the conversation that has to do with stages of life, where does Libra fit into this picture? Libra is all about the one-on-one relationships of life. And this can be romantic relationships, but it's also all different types of partnerships and relationships. It's also the house of marriage. So there's that connection with the one-on-one relationships, but it's also one-on-one relationships in the general sense. So it could be other types of one-on-one relationships. But anyhow, the point of the story, or the point that I'm getting at here, is that Libra is all about relationships. Now, here's another thing in astrology. When you go around the wheel of the zodiac, all of the signs are actually pairs of signs. So it's not just the 12 signs, they're also pairs. And when you go directly across the circle, you've got an opposite sign. And these are like twin yin-yang pairs. And they're sort of opposite, but you know how opposites, sometimes in the way that they're opposite, they have like a kind of mirror image similarity about them. So it's like yin to the yang. So this is helpful in understanding Libra, in my opinion, is looking at the opposite here. So what is the opposite of Libra? It's Aries. And we talked about Aries. That's that beginning of the year. That's the quest for identity. That's emerging out into the world. Here I am. But also Aries is kind of like, it's all about me, myself, and I. And I don't mean that in the negative sense. It's just there is a stage, there are domains of life where it is necessary to develop that sense of, me, myself, and I, and getting in touch with that. And that's what Aries represents. But Libra is the opposite. Instead of all about me, myself, and I, Libra is like curiosity about the other. What do other people think? What makes them tick? Why do they think that? Why do they operate the way that they do? And also curiosity and fun, but there's also associated with relationships. So there's also the flirtation that goes along with this. Like, I kind of want to, I want to see what would it be like to go on a date with this person? And I'm not being serious yet. I just want to check things out. I want to see what it feels like. What does it feel like to flirt with them? How did they respond? When I joke around, how are they going to respond to that? And this type of thing. So it's curiosity, it's fun, learning about the other. Opposite of Aries, it's all about me, myself, and I. They're on a mission. The Aries with the ram's head, with the ram's horns, headbutt, get out of my way because I got to go climb a mountain. Aries is on a mission. Libra, it's like, hey, I'm kind of curious about learning about other people. I want to see what makes them tick. What are they about? How do they think? And also the social fabric of the relationships. So, how do relationships work? How do they tick? Also on a little bit of a deeper level, like when I need to form partnerships with people to get things done in life, or in terms of business, or in terms of different things, that the way things operate in the social domain, Libras are really tuned in to like, why do relationships work? Why do they break down? What makes them work? What makes them tick? What makes them go the way that they go? Now, another thing about Libra is that it's a cardinal air sign, and cardinal means at the beginning of a season. So when you're at the beginning of a new season, it's kind of like everybody's standing around like not sure what to do. The cardinal signs are the ones who step out in front and say, this is the new way forward. Cardinal signs are setting the example. So these are not followers. They're have some leadership qualities, some leadership capabilities, even trendsetters, especially in the case of Aries. They're big time with that creativity. They're stepping out and they're doing it. They're not having doubts and second guessing themselves. They're going out and doing it. Now, Libra is a little bit different than the other cardinal signs in that sense, because they can sometimes get so caught up in this world of the other and this curiosity about the other that they will sometimes lose a little bit of their own center and their own self in this domain of the other person. So much of a concern about the other person, forgetting to step back and like, hey, where do I stand on things? I need to get back in touch with that sometimes too. So that's something that now with the other thing with air signs, I brought up cardinal air. So cardinal seasonal aspect, beginning of the new season, leadership, stepping out in front, they're the ones who show us the way forward. But what about the air? Well, earth, air, water, fire, classical elements, the air represents the mind and intellect. So communication is really big with Libras. They really appreciate people who can communicate well or people who are going to engage in the dynamics of conversation. Also Libra ascendants, you're sometimes going to see gifts in certain areas that have to do with some of these things. Now, this is ruled by the planet Mercury, which is also ruler of the mind and communication. And there's so the planetary ruler of Libra is actually Venus, but there's also a Mercury connect. Anyhow, I don't want to go too much into that. I'm getting sidetracked here. If I go into that topic, that's going to take us into two other side topics. Back to basics with it. Cardinal air. Air, we're talking about the mind, we're talking about communication. Something you'll often see with Libras is that there will sometimes be gifts in some areas of expression and communication. It could be things like acting, writing, poetry, literature, different things of like performance and being on stage using their communication and their voice. But also, when you think about it, it makes sense because their orientation towards the other and towards relationships and how relationships work, you got to work the crowd when you're on stage. So there's also a bit of a knack there that goes along with it. And the air signs generally tend to, a lot of people will say that physical attractiveness is like really common with air signs and ascendant air signs as well. Common feature you'll see along with that.
Yeah, that really resonates. Definitely.
Another thing with Libra I should bring up real quick.
Please do.
Because this is huge with Libra. When it comes to the air signs generally, there is, especially with Gemini has the symbolism of the twins and of this dual nature, but I think that this is a characteristic of the air signs generally speaking. What is this dual nature about? Because we're talking about the mind and communication, and the air signs being strongly oriented towards the mind, towards communication. When you're going to be fair and objective about something, you've got to look at both sides of it. So this dual nature has to do with fairness, objectivity, being able to look at both sides and say, hey, the other side that didn't get their chance to speak, they need to be heard also. Doesn't mean we're going to believe and adopt every single thing that they said, but it at least needs to have its own chance to be heard, the same as everything else has to be. You got to be able to look at both sides so that we can be fair and objective about our assessment of things. Now, Libra is also associated with justice, fairness, and balance. And balance is going to be a big thing. They're big seekers of balance. When there is imbalances, they are seeking to harmonize those things.
And I think that's why Brandon and I get along so well and why we can have the show like this, because I'm a Libra sun, he's a Libra rising. And so we both want to hear both sides. We're open to, looking at both sides. We're not trying to make claims and trying to say we're right, but there's like a balance, like a justice type of we're looking at it from objectively without having to make any claims on who's right and who's not right, allegedly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's lay all the information out and just take a look, see what kind of picture comes out. Let's lay it all out there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I like that. I'm glad that's what you got out of it, Sharon. That's a great point, because I was just thinking, wow, we're both just super hot, I guess. There's my humor. Yeah.
Well, I do have one more question, and I know we're past time, but I still want to ask.
No, please.
If that's okay. So I wanted to know what it means when the houses are empty, because I was looking at my chart and I have several houses that are empty. What does that mean? Does it just mean they're
that's
neutral?
An interesting one. So I'm not an expert on this topic, but I have kind of my own take on it. which might overlap with some other perspectives on it. But anyhow, we were talking about how the ascendant is where we put the horizon in the natal chart. It also lays out the boundaries of the first house, and it lays out the order of the rest of the houses in your chart 1 to 12. And then we also talked about how these are associated with stages of life. So when you go and compare the order in your natal chart to the seasonal order, you get information about these different stages of life. What is my orientation, towards the type of home and family environment that I grew up in, 4th house? What is my orientation towards my self-expression and my creativity and my creative playful side, 5th house, different things. So even if there's not a planet sitting there, there is a lot of information in terms of what sign you have in a specific house number and the type of information that you can learn about that stage of life, but also, your development as an individual, what was going on there. For example, 4th house carries information about the home, the family, the relationship with the mother, your family roots, your family ancestry. So even if there's not a planet sitting there, there's a lot of descriptive information about the nature of your home, family environment, relationships with the family roots, family ancestry, and the mother, and all those things. So there's still a ton of information there.
Thank you. That really helps because I'm looking at it and I was always confused about it. But now now it's making sense that, okay, you have the house. And so you have I have some of Leo and some of, I guess, Virgo in that house. Yeah, some of Leo and some of Virgo. I mean, according to this one, it's weird because I have 2 charts, one that a girl did for me over a year ago, and she put in the day I was born, the time, and everything, and it's everything lined up. My houses were lined, all the quadrant type things were lined up with all the zodiac. But when I did it myself yesterday, it's not. So I don't know if it's
there's there's a whole bunch of different
options,
what are called house systems.
Oh.
And there's different schools of thought and different perspectives on how it should be laid out. And some people split them up into equal segments, or some schools of thought on this, say they should be split up into equal segments. And some of them say they should go another way. And some of them, so there's all different ways of laying it out. So that's why
I see now that it says method, web style, whole signs. So it just did it by whole. That's the one she sent me. And then when I did it myself, I just did it. I didn't select anything.
If you did astro.com,
it's Placidus.
If you did it on astro.com, if you don't change the settings, it has a default setting and it'll do what's called Placidus.
Yeah,
so
that's what it says.
The Placidus house system for that one, and she sent you the whole sign.
Yeah, the whole signs. Yeah, which I didn't even realize.
Sometimes it's fun to look at different ones and see which one you like better. Is there one that makes more sense or fits better in a certain way? I think maybe it should be done this way. Or there might be a book or an astrologer that you listen to and they might have maybe made a good argument for using some certain system. And then you can go in and you can change the settings to fit that system that you're learning or studying or whatever. So,
okay. So what I'm a little bit confused about is that if you look at the one, she did the whole signs one, but the one I did was Placidus, the divisions are not equal. So I have, of course, the ascendant and descendant like this, right? But the split between 3rd and 4th house and 10th and 9th house are at an angle like this. So they're not straight. So in the not quadrants, but whatever you would call those things, because they're in 12 pieces. So whatever you would say that is, those are the little pieces the pie pieces are not of equal size, each of them. It's weird. I don't know.
So that has to do with these different systems and different schools of thought on how you go about laying it out. And,
okay.
There's different approaches. Some people say it should be done this way, or it makes more sense and we like it better to do it this way. Or maybe it's just cleaner, easier to read. And so we split them up that way. And that's, a certain school of thought says, that's why we do this or whatever. So there's different approaches to it, but really when it comes down to it, it's all roughly the same information. There might be a few details here and there that are different, but if you're looking at the big picture, it's telling the same basic story. I even spent some time comparing my sidereal chart to my tropical one, and there were some differences, and it was like hearing the same story told from a different person looking at a different angle, but it was the same story though. I was like, a lot of these things, the things coming through, is it still the same story?
Right. That's interesting.
And it was kind of even fun and cool to look at like the two different ones and be like, huh, I feel like I kind of got another angle on the same like picture.
Yeah. That's got to be what it is. Cause it is what it is. It's just people like putting the line here and some people putting the line there, but it's describing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a different way, I suppose. So
Awesome.
Anyway, great conversation, Brandon.
Yeah, I like that because especially the way you approach it, because so many people, we were saying this earlier, they kind of try to prove it or disprove it or whatever. But if you're going in with an open mind and you're following your intuition, you can learn, just like I was saying, you can learn something from everybody you talk to. You can learn something from every different system. It has some kind of validity. And it's just really about what resonates with you. And at the end of the day, you're just learning more about yourself and self-knowledge. It's not any kind of competition about what's better or what's more accurate or whatever. It's just how you perceive it. And some people just perceive things differently. So certain things work better for them, So I like that you approach it with that open mind. That's great.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
You just reminded me when you said that of my friend Gabriel. He's got a channel that he calls Slick Dissident. And he has this, I got to go back and learn the saying word for it. I forget how he says it. But anyhow, he has this saying that he says, something to the effect of, I am a student who teaches, and I am a teacher who's ever studying and learning, or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you got to be open to new information and updating your perspective and your approach. If somebody says they've got 100% the truth and they've got it all nailed down and it only goes this way, then I'm going to be like, I'm going to be really skeptical of the information coming from that angle. But if somebody's like, well, I'm still working through it, I'm processing, and this is where I'm at currently. This is the journey I went to get to this stage, and here's what's coming up next. And I'm like, okay, that's the person I want to listen to.
Yeah,
somebody who's going to be humble and open-minded about it, and
absolutely
taking that approach, like you had said,
Yeah, and like what you said about Gabriel and how he says that, it sounded very Libra to me. It sounded very like, we're just going to look at it from both sides,
Right.
And there's something I always say, that we're all on a journey and no one has arrived. So like, if you think you've arrived, I don't know what to say to you.
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me of the quote with the Tao, and I'll bring this back around because we were talking about the Tao earlier, where those who know don't talk and those who talk don't know.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
I love the balance of the Tao. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what really attracted me too. I've always been attracted to just the yin yang symbol in general since I was a child. But where can people find you, and where can they find your channel and your work and stuff if they want to check you out?
So I'm laughing because at the time when I was feeling shy about putting my name and my face out there, I was making some content where there was like audio and images and stuff. I wouldn't speak and I wouldn't put my face there. And I wrote my name backwards. And that's why you see that weird name on my channel, NIVAD 17. Yeah. My first name is Davin. It's Davin backwards.
Yeah.
I like that.
I'm on YouTube, Telegram, Instagram. If you find me any of those places, there's also a link tree that's got like the links together in one place where you can go and find it or whatever. But I've been putting these under the name NIVAD 17, NIVAD 17. On YouTube, it's NIVAD 17 Astrology. NIVAD Astrology. NIVAD 17 Astrology.
Yes.
And then from there, links to the website, links to Telegram, links to other places.
Awesome. And I'm sure Sharon will put those links below wherever you're watching or listening to this. Oh yeah, there's your yin and yang. There we go.
I was wearing the bracelet. Happened to have the little yin yang on it.
Ooh, what a synchronicity. Well, Davin, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a
Totally.
lot today, and I know Sharon's mind was blown and mine as well. This is a great conversation. We're definitely
Absolutely.
going to have you come back on and talk more about this stuff. But yeah, that was great. Sharon, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I so
Go ahead,
happy
Davin.
that you guys invited me. I had a lot of fun. Had a lot of
Thank
fun with
you.
this for sure, and excellent conversation that developed from it. And yeah, we gotta stay in touch because this was a lot of fun. I'm so happy you guys invited me.
Yeah, yeah, anytime. Totally, totally.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we covered, and there was a lot of questions that we could still cover, but we will save that for another time.
Yeah, we'll leave the people wanting more. That's the secret. I
Yes.
heard you always
Right, right.
leave them wanting more. Hey, there's my voice. There you go. All right. Well, thanks again. I had a really great time. This is a great conversation. I love how we're basically on the same wavelength, especially about the self-healing, because that's really important to me with people. So, well, Sharon, what do we say to the good people?
That if you're not over Sharon,
Then you're totally not Karen.
that's your voice.
So
There's your
yeah, that's
voice.
my voice. So overshare and share on everybody. We'll see you next time. Oh, and I forgot. How did I forget this? Thank you so much to the chat. You guys are the best. Every Thursday night, we premiere these things at 8:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you'd like to support us, the best way to support us is to come and just hang out in the chat. That's our favorite thing. Or you can go to morelawsmoreproblems.com, click on the Oversharing tab, and there's ways to support us monetarily or whatever. Or, like we said, just leave a comment under this where you see it. You could find us on basically every podcast app, iTunes, Sharon,
Apple Podcasts,
Apple
Google,
Podcasts, Google,
Amazon, Audible, Spotify.
Spotify. Yep.
I think and
And
Podbean.
Podbean. There you go. And if you're listening to this and you don't know that we do this on video, go to the YouTube channel. It's Brandon Bonanza, and you could see our fun, smiling faces. All right. Now we're done. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.